Chapter 25:10. However, Patriarch Baha didn't respond. He just looked at the High Priestess and Vice Patriarch expressionlessly. The two looked up at the platform and were about to report the situation to Patriarch Baha when they saw two guards standing below the platform. Both of them were stunned for a moment. Then, they shouted in unison, "Bastards! How dare you break into the temple and offend the Patriarch? Get out!" Ji Tianqing and White Dragon didn't respond. They just looked at the two coldly. Patriarch Baha furrowed his brows and shouted angrily, "You two bastards, why aren't you kneeling?" The High Priestess and Vice Patriarch were stunned. They looked at each other in disbelief. They couldn't believe that Patriarch Baha would scold them in such a tone. This was something that had never happened before. "Patriarch, what's wrong? The atmosphere seems a bit strange." The two were confused and couldn't help but talk to each other. Right at this moment, Ji Tianqing and the White Dragon raised their hands at the same time, forming two strange hand seals with their fingers, creating two mysterious divine seals. The High Priestess and Vice Patriarch finally realized that something was wrong, but it was too late. Whoosh! A golden light flashed in the cave, and a light shield appeared out of nowhere and covered the entire hall. The High Priestess and Vice Patriarch were suppressed by the light shield. They were under immense pressure and fell to the ground with a plop. As Ji Tianqing and White Dragon controlled the formation, the power of the formation became stronger and stronger. The golden light shield also became thicker and thicker. The High Priestess and Vice Patriarch were forced to crawl on the ground. Their bodies were flattened, and red lava kept coming out of their noses and mouths. The two couldn't resist. They tried their best to raise their heads and look at Patriarch Baha with their eyes wide open. "Why? Patriarch, why are you suppressing us? What did we do wrong? Why are you punishing us like this?" Patriarch Baha lay on the platform and looked down at them. He said in a cold voice, "Because you disrespected our master." "Master? Who is our master?" The High Priest and the Deputy Patriarch were both stunned. Their expressions became more and more interesting. At this time, Ji Tianqing stepped out and looked at them indifferently. He waved his hand and released rays of white light into their bodies. The two of them were suppressed by the formation, unable to resist at all, and unable to resist the invasion of the white light. Only then did they realize that the culprit was Ji Tianqing. Their eyes bulged out of their sockets in anger, and they began to curse hysterically. "Damned bastard, what did you do to the Patriarch? Bastard, what are you trying to do? How dare you disrespect me? Are you tired of living?" However, Ji Tianqing didn't pay any attention to their roars. His hands continued to form hand seals, releasing countless white lights. Boundless spiritual energy poured into their bodies, invaded their minds, and eroded their souls. As time passed, the consciousness of the High Priest and the Deputy Patriarch became more and more blurry, and their souls became muddled. After 100 breaths of time, their souls suffered a heavy blow and they fainted on the spot. What happened next was much simpler. Ji Tianqing continued to cast spells for another 100 breaths of time. Using the divine technique, he completely controlled the High Priest and the Deputy Patriarch's souls. After he finished casting the spell, the White Dragon walked up and kicked the two of them awake. After the High Priest and the Deputy Patriarch woke up, their eyes were still clear and did not look out of place. But their attitudes and reactions were completely different. They were extremely respectful and fearful of Ji Tianqing. It was an irresistible sense of respect that came from the depths of their souls. Under the control of Ji Tianqing's spiritual sense, the High Priest and the Deputy Patriarch stood obediently in the hall, waiting for orders. Ji Tianqing cast another spell to deactivate the divine array, and the golden light barrier disappeared. The cave returned to silence, as if nothing had happened. The Patriarch, the Deputy Patriarch, and the High Priest have all surrendered. Only the old Patriarch is left. Ji Tianqing murmured and used his spiritual sense to order the high priest, "Go and invite the old patriarch here. Tell him that the patriarch wants to discuss something important with him." The high priest naturally obeyed. He bowed respectfully to show that he obeyed, then turned and left the cave. Everyone waited for a few minutes before the high priest brought the old patriarch Baal into the cave. Baal had been meditating before, and he had just heard the news of the enemy invasion and the heavy casualties of the guards. He was worried. When he heard that the high priest had invited him to discuss something important, he rushed over without hesitation. When he entered the cave, he was still anxious and worried. Seeing that the patriarch, the high priest, and the deputy patriarch were all there, his heart sank. He had a bad feeling. However, just as he stood still in the cave, before he could speak, a bright golden light lit up around him. Swoosh! A dazzling light barrier appeared, covering a radius of 1,000 feet and suppressing him. A terrifying suppressive force came from all directions, suppressing it to the ground and causing it to tremble uncontrollably. "Baal, what are you doing?" The old patriarch Baal was furious. He glared at Patriarch Baal and shouted loudly, struggling with all his might. Patriarch Baal was expressionless. Under Ji Tianqing's command, the high priest and the deputy patriarch threw themselves at Baal and pressed him to the ground. Baal was even more furious. He cursed the high priest and the deputy patriarch harshly. But all of this was in vain. Ji Tianqing cast a divine technique and quickly made Baal faint. When he woke up, his soul was also controlled by Ji Tianqing, and he became a puppet at Ji Tianqing's disposal. At this point, the four leaders and powerhouses of the Earth's core cave were all under Ji Tianqing's control. The four of them stood respectfully in the cave, listening to Ji Tianqing's orders. Ji Tianqing ordered Patriarch Baal, the high priest, and the deputy patriarch, "From today onwards, the human race of the Earth's core cave is under my control. Send out all warriors to mine the source stone vein. Leave 80% of the source stone vein to me. The remaining 20% is for your use." Patriarch Baal and the other two respectfully bowed and said, "Yes," in unison. Then, the three of them bowed and left the cave to carry out the order. Ji Tianqing looked at Patriarch Baal and ordered, "Take me to your treasury and take out all the source stones." Baal did not hesitate to say, "Yes," and led him and the white dragon out of the cave, rushing to the treasury not far away. The treasury was deep in the Black Gold Mountain range, located inside the mountain. There was only one passage in and out, and it was heavily guarded. Apart from Patriarch Baal, the high priest, and the deputy patriarch, no one else could enter. Baal led the way in front, so naturally, there was no obstruction. The guards guarding the entrance were surprised when they saw Ji Tianqing and the white dragon appear. They did not understand why Patriarch Baal would bring two guards into the treasury. This was something that had never happened before. But they could only think about it. They did not dare to open their mouths and stop them. Chapter 25:11. The Earth's core cave. Man's treasury was actually a cave. The cave with a radius of 1,000 feet was pitch black, and there was only one exit with a divine array. There was no shape or pattern in the cave, and there were very few traces of man-made excavation. On the left side, there were a few hills piled up, all of which were rough ores, and a rough aura came from them. The big ones were the size of millstones, and the small ones were only the size of fists. Some were black and gold, some were black and purple, some were pure black, and some were black and red. The main composition of these ores was naturally pure black origin stones. But there were more impurities in the ores, and they contained gems and metals of various colors. Ji Tianqing was not worried. As long as he used the refining techniques of the human race to carefully smelt these origin stones, he would be able to obtain pure origin stones. He looked at the right side of the cave and saw that the ground was piled up with long black knives, axes, spears, and other weapons. Although those weapons were very simple, there was no trace of delicacy or magnificence. But when he saw more than 3,000 origin stone weapons piled up on the ground, he could not help but smile. So many origin stones are enough to solve our future cultivation problems, and we can also refine many divine weapons and equipment. As he spoke, he opened his spatial ring and put all the origin stone weapons and ores into it. White Dragon was excited, and his eyes shone with excitement as he rubbed his hands. The old patriarch Bar was a little distressed, but he did not dare to show any dissatisfaction. He even took the initiative to help Ji Tianqing load the ores and origin stone weapons. Not long after, Ji Tianqing put all the ores and weapons in the treasury into the spatial ring. Then, he left the treasury with satisfaction and returned to the Earth's core temple with White Dragon and Bar. Patriarch Baha, the High Priest, and the Deputy Patriarch had not returned yet. They were busy mobilizing the warriors in the clan and assigning them the task of mining the origin stone mine. Ji Tianqing waited for a while before Patriarch Baha rushed back to the temple. So, Ji Tianqing and White Dragon removed their disguises and showed their true faces. Baha and Baha, father and son, suddenly opened their eyes wide and stared at them carefully. Ji Tianqing pointed to White Dragon beside him and said to the father and son, "I'm very busy. I may not come to the Magma Sea in the future. This is my disciple, White Dragon. He will represent me to contact you in the future. He will pass on my orders. He will be in charge of the origin stone mine." Bar and Baha were stunned for a moment. They quickly bowed and said, "Yes, sir." Ji Tianqing looked at Bai Long and said earnestly, "Bai Long, Master still has some matters to attend to and will be leaving soon. You stay here and learn the language of the human race in the underground cave as soon as possible so that you can communicate with them. Also, you have to supervise them as they mine the origin stones. If there are any abnormalities, report to me immediately." The White Dragon was lively. He was a person who could not stand loneliness. He had long since grown tired of the days of seclusion and wanted to find something to do. He was looking forward to this mission from the bottom of his heart. "These toads, I guarantee that I'll make them obedient and obedient. I will collect all the origin stones they have to offer every month. I won't let them cheat." Seeing his reaction, Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said, "White Dragon, the Earth's core cave people have been living in seclusion for tens of thousands of years. They are not a cruel and warlike race. If you can adjust your mentality and become friends with them, you can make them work even harder. If the situation allows, don't be too harsh on them. This is the way to go in the long run." White Dragon nodded thoughtfully and said with a smile, "Yes, White Dragon understands. Master has always been kind and benevolent. The Earth's core cave people are lucky to have met you." Ji Tianqing just smiled and did not say anything. He turned and walked out of the cave. White Dragon and Baha sent him out of the Earth's core temple and flew out of the Black Gold Mountain range. After Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared in the Magma Sea, White Dragon returned to the Earth's core temple. Next, he asked Baha and Baha to teach him the language and writing of the Earth's core cave people. Ji Tianqing flew all the way up and left the Magma Sea without any obstructions. 15 minutes later, he returned to the Hidden Dragon Abyss and found Blue Kun, Qianyu, Black Dragon, and the Golden Mountain King. The Golden Mountain King and the Xitigarbha divine armor were injured. The three divine beasts were safe and sound, but they were also recuperating. Ji Tianqing asked the Golden Mountain King and found out the whole story. It turned out that not long after he and White Dragon sneaked into the Black Gold Mountain range, the High Priest and the Deputy Patriarch led a few hundred warriors and rushed out of the Magma Sea. At that time, the Golden Mountain King, the Xitigarbha divine armor, and the three divine beasts were hiding in a cave on the cliff. The High Priest and the Deputy Patriarch used a secret technique to detect their aura and surrounded the cave. Therefore, the two sides engaged in a fierce battle. The three divine beasts showed their power. Not only did they injure the High Priest and the Deputy Patriarch, they also slaughtered a large number of the Earth's core cave people. Unfortunately, the Golden Mountain King and the Xitigarbha divine armor were weak and suffered heavy injuries in the battle. In the end, the Earth's core cave people were defeated and fled back into the magma sea. The Golden Mountain King, the Xitigarbha divine armor, and the 3 divine beasts stayed in the cave to recuperate. After the Golden Mountain King finished speaking, Qian Yu could not wait to ask Ji Tianqing, "Old Ji, did your plan go well? Where's White Dragon? Is he injured or captured by the Earth's core cave people?" The Black Dragon also came over and asked with concern, "Old Ji, did your plan fail? Don't worry, we'll go back with you and avenge White Dragon." Ji Tianqing glared at them and said angrily, "Don't you trust me that much? How can I fail when I'm the one who did it? The 4 martial gods in the Earth's core cave have all been controlled by me and have become my puppets. I asked White Dragon to stay in the tribe and supervise them in mining the Dawn Stone mine." The Golden Mountain King, the Xitigarbha divine armor, Qian Yu, and the Black Dragon were shocked and exclaimed in disbelief. "No way! It's only been less than an hour. Old Ji, are you too strong or are the Earth's core cave people too weak? Controlling the 4 powerhouses is equivalent to controlling the entire Earth's core cave people. Old Ji, you're too powerful. From now on, we'll have an endless supply of Dawn Stones, right?" Seeing that everyone was so excited, Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. "That's right. The entire Earth's core cave people's tribe and the Dawn Stones in the magma sea all belong to us. This matter ends here. I have more important things to do. We should leave." The Golden Mountain King, the Xitigarbha divine armor, Qian Yu, and the Black Dragon did not object and left with him. Only Lan Kun refused to leave. He insisted on going to the Earth's core cave people's tribe to meet White Dragon. Chapter 25:12. Ji Tianqing knew that Lan Kun and Bai Long were very close. They did not want to be separated. He did not stop Lan Kun. Instead, he agreed to let it stay and help Bai Long manage things. Therefore, Lan Kun flew into the magma sea with joy to meet the White Dragon. Ji Tianqing brought Golden Mountain King, Xitigarbha divine armor, Qian Yu, and Black Dragon out of the lava ocean. They flew up and soon flew out of the hidden dragon abyss. After returning to the ground, Ji Tianqing took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and let Golden Mountain King and Xitigarbha divine armor enter the sword's world to heal their injuries. At the same time, he took out a few Dawn Stones and gave them to Golden Mountain King. After Golden Mountain King's injuries were healed, he used the Earth Spirit's smelting method to refine the Dawn Stones. After that, Ji Tianqing took out the small golden tower and brought Qian Yu and Black Dragon back to Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower. Swoosh! On the 5th floor of Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower. After a flash of white light, Ji Tianqing and the 2 divine beasts appeared on the Fey God altar. He brought the 2 divine beasts into the 6th floor and flew into the distorted spacetime. On the way, he said to Qian Yu and Black Dragon, "I know that you don't want to cultivate in seclusion. It's boring to cultivate in seclusion for so many years. However, the enemy we are facing is too powerful. We have to do our best to increase our strength." Qian Yu and the Black Dragon saw his solemn expression and sincere words, so they nodded to show that they understood. "Old Ji, we understand what you mean. We also know what's important. Old Ji, don't worry. We will cultivate hard and become stronger." Seeing that the 2 of them were so sensible, Ji Tianqing smiled with relief. He took out 4 Dawn Stone swords and gave them to Qian Yu and Black Dragon. He said, "Use these Dawn Stone swords to cultivate. The divine power in them will be enough for you to cultivate in seclusion for many years. After I refine and purify the Origin Stone mine, I will give you pure Origin Stones." Qian Yu and Black Dragon took the Dawn Stone swords and said goodbye to him. Then they turned around and left. They entered the depths of the distorted spacetime and went into seclusion. Ji Tianqing continued to fly forward. He found Yunyao and Ji Ke separately and gave them some origin stone weapons. The two of them were cultivating in seclusion, consuming ordinary cultivation resources. Their progress was extremely slow. With an origin stone as a source of divine power, their cultivation progress would be even faster. After doing all this, Ji Tianqing stopped to rest. He sat cross-legged in the distorted space-time. His spirit entered Kenshin's tomb and entered the divine weapon pavilion through the tombstone on the wilderness. In the middle of the magnificent divine weapon pavilion, there stood a bronze cauldron that was 30 meters tall. It was the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the Nine-Heaven Divine Cauldron slowly left the ground and flew out of the divine weapon pavilion. Shwa! A moment later, the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron shrunk to the size of a fingernail and flew out of Ji Tianqing's body. The divine cauldron floated in front of him and slowly spun. It gradually grew larger and returned to its original appearance. Ji Tianqing's spirit left Kenshin's tomb and returned to his body. He looked at the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron with a burning gaze and muttered to himself, "Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron, you are a divine cauldron that can refine anything. Although this origin stone has never appeared in the world, with your power, you should be able to refine it easily." After saying that, he raised his palms and formed a divine seal. He released surging astral divine fire and injected it into the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The patterns on the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron immediately lit up with silver light. The divine array in the cauldron was activated, and surging astral fire immediately ignited. Ji Tianqing continued to cast the spell for half an hour. When the temperature in the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron reached its peak, he took out 2 millstone-sized origin stone ores and threw them into the divine cauldron. The 2 ores were black gold in color. 80% of them were black origin stones, and 20% were metallic impurities. The ores had to be refined to remove the impurities and become pure origin stones. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the array in the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron sped up. The 2 black gold ores flew around in the cauldron, enduring the burning of the astral divine fire. Soon, 2 hours passed. The 2 incomparably hard ores were burned red and gradually melted. 4 hours later, the ores were burned until they were crystal clear, and golden liquid kept flowing out. The impurities in the ores were removed continuously, and they became pure. The size of the ores also gradually shrank. Ji Tianqing continued to cast the spell. It took him half a day to refine the 2 ores. Shwa! When he cast the spell to open the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron, a surge of astral divine fire wrapped around the 2 black origin stones and flew out of the cauldron. The ores that were originally millstone-sized had shrunk by 20%. They became rounder and looked like 2 black stone balls. Ji Tianqing observed carefully for a moment and found that there were no impurities in the stone balls. They were the purest origin stones. He looked into the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron and saw a wash-basin-sized metal ball at the bottom. There was no doubt that it was the metal impurities in the ores. After being refined by the Divine Cauldron, all the metal impurities flowed out and condensed into this golden ball. Very good, the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron did not disappoint me. Ji Tianqing was very satisfied with this result. Not only did the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron purify the origin stones, it also refined the metal out of the ores. There was no waste at all. Ji Tianqing picked up the golden ball and observed it carefully for a moment. He could not help but smile in relief. It's actually the extremely precious earth-fire divine gold, the best material to refine divine artifacts. This surprised him a little, and his heart was filled with anticipation. He already saw hope. Soon, he would be able to realize another plan. Therefore, he took out more than 10 ores and threw them into the Nine Heavens Divine Cauldron to refine and purify them. Half a day later, the refining was completed. Ji Tianqing obtained more than 10 pure origin stones, as well as 5 types of metals and gems. For the next 3 months, he kept casting spells and using the 9 heavens divine cauldron to refine the ores. After 3 months of hard work, he obtained more than 1,000 pure origin stones and more than 30 types of divine-grade metals and gems. It was obvious that the impurities in the ores were divine-grade materials. In the sea of lava, only divine-grade origin stones, metals and gems could be preserved. Some of the 1,000 origin stones were as big as a wash basin, while others were as big as a water tank. If the size of a fist was the standard, the 1,000 origin stones could be divided into more than 20,000 pieces. With so many origin stones, Ji Tianqing could cultivate in seclusion for 1,000 years. However, the number of ores that he had plundered from the human tribe's treasury in the Earth's core cave was 20 times more than that. If he refined all of them, he could obtain 500,000 standard-sized origin stones. This did not include the thousands of origin stone weapons that he had plundered. If he refined all of them into standard origin stones, the number would increase by another 100,000. At the thought of this, Ji Tianqing was overwhelmed with excitement. His eyes were filled with anticipation. With so many origin stones, not only can we reach the peak of the martial god realm, but we can also be fully armed. Each of us will have a set of origin stone divine artifacts. In the next few hundred years, we will not lack cultivation resources. Chapter 25:13. With the massive amount of dawn stones, Ji Tianqing was filled with confidence and anticipation for the future. He put away the 9th heaven cauldron and went to look for Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Qian Yu, and the black dragon. The dawn stones he refined in the past 3 months were divided into 5 portions. He kept 1 portion for himself and gave the other 4 to the others. With the large amount of dawn stones, they would not lack cultivation resources for the next few hundred years. After arranging this matter, Ji Tianqing finally had some free time and began to cultivate. Currently, he was cultivating the Sword Soul Dao level 9, which was also the pinnacle of the Sword Dao. With the help of the dawn stones, he could continuously absorb divine power and increase his strength several times faster. Time passed quickly in the distorted space-time. Unknowingly, 30 years had passed. Ji Tianqing's strength had increased by 5 times. Naturally, his cultivation level had risen to the 4th level of the martial god realm. Moreover, he absorbed endless divine power from the dawn stones, causing the attribute of his divine power to change. He originally had a special divine power that merged the 5 elements, lightning, and light energy. Now, his divine power had the spatial attribute, which made it even more mysterious and powerful. His control over the power of space had also reached a higher level. The most obvious change was that his teleportation distance had increased by 50%. In the past, when he was traveling, he could teleport more than 200 miles each time and he would not feel tired for 2 days. Now, he could teleport more than 400 miles each time. If he was in a life-or-death situation, he could use the teleportation divine art to save his life, and he could travel 4,000 miles in an instant. Of course, this trump card could not be used repeatedly. It could only be used once every few hours. But even so, it was still powerful enough to shock everyone. Ordinary martial gods, even the emissary of the divine ruins, Fairy Yuqing, and General Fu Long were not as powerful. Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. He muttered to himself, "I've been in seclusion for 30 years, but only 7 months have passed in the outside world. I wonder how Bai Long is doing in the Earth's core cave." Therefore, he got up and left the divine tower to send a message to Bai Long. He waited patiently on the barren mountain outside the Yin-Yang secret realm for 15 minutes before he received Bai Long's message. In the jade slip, the white dragon reported in detail the situation of the past 7 months. Reporting to Master, Disciple and Lan Kuan are fine. Don't worry. Although there had been some twists and turns in the past half a year, and many people in the Earth's core cave had sensed that something was wrong and had joined forces to resist and escape. However, Ba Er and his son, as well as the high priest, listened to his disciples' words and did not dare to disobey him. Under the leadership and command of the disciples, they worked hard to maintain the peace of the tribe, resolve internal conflicts, and suppress the resistance of the people in the cave. Now that everything was on the right track, the mining of origin stones was progressing with each passing day. This disciple has given them a task. Every half a year, they will be counted and handed in origin stones according to the rules. Half a month ago, this disciple had just collected over 300 origin stone mines and was about to ask Lan Kun to deliver them to you. After listening to White Dragon's report, Ji Tianqing pondered for a moment before replying. White Dragon, of course I'm not worried about you. At present, we have only just taken control of the human race in the underground cave. The situation has just stabilized, so you still need to be more vigilant. For the first few years, you can collect origin stones every half a year. After 10 years, you can extend the time limit to 1 year. You can keep the origin stone mines for now. When I need them, I will send you a message and ask Lan Kun to deliver them. After sending the message, Ji Tianqing summoned the small golden pagoda and returned to the divine pagoda. He returned to the distorted spacetime and summoned the Sword of Burial of Heaven. He personally entered the Sword's world to check on the Golden Mountain King's situation. Whoosh! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianqing appeared in the sky above Peaceful Earth City. Under the bright sun, Peaceful Earth City, which had a radius of 15 kilometers, was a scene of peace and tranquility. The city was surrounded by majestic walls, and rows of dazzling palaces and tall buildings had been built in the city. Tens of thousands of Earth Spirit race citizens lived and worked peacefully in the city. Ji Tianqing looked towards the center of the city and saw a golden octagonal cauldron standing in the middle of the city square. It was about 30 meters tall and was shining brightly under the sunlight. The plaza under the octagonal furnace had been modified into a large formation, and the ground was covered in patterns and diagrams. Nearly 800 strong Earth Spirit warriors were scattered in 8 directions of the magic formation, concentrating on activating the magic formation. Inside the golden octagonal furnace, a raging fire burned and exuded a terrifying heat. The Golden Mountain King, carrying a golden warhammer on his shoulder, stood above the octagonal furnace and used some kind of secret technique to control the flames and the formation inside the furnace. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing smiled in satisfaction and murmured, "It seems that the Golden Mountain King's injuries have recovered." He descended from the sky and landed above the octagonal furnace, arriving beside the Golden Mountain King. The Golden Mountain King hurriedly stopped casting and bowed respectfully to him. "This humble king greets the young master." After saying this, he waved at a group of people not far away. A 4-foot-tall, short but strong young man hurriedly rushed over and bowed to Ji Tianqing to greet him. "Ai Luo greets the young master." Ji Tianqing was startled. After looking at him for a while, he remembered that he was the Golden Mountain King's son, Prince Ai Luo of the Earth Spirit race. He nodded with a smile and said, "I didn't expect that Ai Luo would have grown up after 9 years. You look just like your father." Ai Luo was excited. He beat his chest with his left hand and said excitedly, "It's my greatest honor that the young master still remembers me. Don't worry, young master. I will definitely become a strong warrior like my father and follow you with unparalleled loyalty." Ji Tianqing nodded with a smile and said a few words of encouragement. The Golden Mountain King waved his hand and asked Ai Luo to leave. He then went to control the formation and flames of the octagonal furnace. He clasped his hands to Ji Tianqing and asked, "Young master, why are you here? Do you have any orders for me?" Ji Tianqing slightly nodded and said, "I'm here to check on your condition. Since your injuries have healed, I don't need to worry anymore. By the way, what are you all doing?" The Golden Mountain King smiled proudly and explained excitedly, "Young master, after my injuries have healed, I've been refining the Source Stone with all my might. This is the most powerful and sacred treasure of my race. It's called the Divine Earth Furnace. It's not a divine artifact, but it's made by gathering the strength of my entire race and using more than 50 types of metals. We use a secret technique to activate the divine earth furnace. It can gather the power of the earth and use it to refine ores and metals. It can also be used to refine the most perfect weapons and magic treasures. We've already refined and purified the source stone that you gave me. Now, I'm using the divine earth furnace and the source stone to forge weapons and magic treasures. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing looked pleased and asked, "You haven't reached the God realm and don't have a divine artifact. But you can use a secret technique to refine source stones. That's incredible. How's the forging going? When will you succeed?" Chapter 25:14. Using origin stones to refine divine weapons was what Ji Tianqing cared about the most. Because this was the plan he was going to carry out next. Golden Mountain King nodded and said excitedly, "Luckily, I have worked hard and have not let you down. 3 days ago, I have finally succeeded in making my first dawn stone weapon." As he spoke, he took out a black war hammer from his infinite space ring. The war hammer did not look fancy, but it was very delicate and contained a strong sense of weight and power. The handle of the war hammer was as thick as a child's arm and was about 4 feet long. It was as tall as Golden Mountain King. The war hammer was as big as a wicker basket. One end was round and the other end was shaped like a shuttle. The surface of the war hammer was clear and smooth, as if it was naturally made and nurtured by the earth. Ji Tianqing took the dawn stone war hammer and looked at it carefully. He could not help but praise, "Very good. Golden Mountain King, you have done very well. This is a finished divine weapon, but it is also a blank piece of paper. There are no decorations on it and it has the possibility of increasing its power. For example, if you add a powerful holy array on the war hammer, you can increase its grade and make it more effective and powerful." The Jin Shan King quickly nodded and explained, "You're right, young master. That's why I didn't dare to add the formation without your permission. After all, I am only a martial sage. If I add a holy array, it will be a waste and lower the grade of the war hammer." He paused for a while and said embarrassedly, "Originally, I wanted to make a dawn stone divine sword for you. Unfortunately, I do not have enough experience and did not dare to try it. I chose the war hammer that I am most confident in." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "This is not a problem. I already have the burial of heaven divine sword. There is no need to make another weapon for me. You can make a war hammer first. If you use it to make weapons, you will be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort." When Golden Mountain King heard this, he was surprised and asked in disbelief, "Master, you mean I will use this war hammer?" Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. "That's right. Not only is it for you to use, I'm also giving it to you." The Golden Mountain King was flattered. He waved his hand and said, "No, no, no. This divine artifact is too precious." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said with a chuckle, "I said I'm giving it to you, so it's yours. Don't decline it again. However, I will first add some divine level seals on your warhammer to make it even more effective and powerful. In terms of material, it is a true divinity level treasure. For it to be so natural and unpolished is just too much of a pity." The Golden Mountain King became even more excited. He quickly bowed and said sincerely, "Thank you for giving me the divine weapon and adding the restrictive spell on my war hammer. I am very grateful. From now on, I will do my best to serve you for the rest of my life." Ji Tianqing nodded with a smile and began to add a divine array to the war hammer. The war hammer floated in the air, flickering with black light. His hands formed a divine art as he continued to release divine power and golden light. They formed divine seals that were attached to the war hammer. The Jin Shan King was dazzled by such a mysterious technique. He was fascinated by it. After an hour, Ji Tianqing added 22 divine level seals on the war hammer. However, this was not the end. He cast a spell and released many colorful thunderbolts, which formed a divine seal and attached it to the war hammer. As a result, the divine power and 24 divine level seals were added to the divine stone war hammer. This war hammer had reached the peak of the Einherjar level divine weapons. When he finished casting the spell, there were many golden and purple patterns on the surface of the war hammer, which made it even more mysterious. He held the war hammer and handed it to the Golden Mountain King. He smiled and said, "This will be your weapon from now on. It can be used to kill enemies and also to refine weapons. I hope you won't disgrace it." The Golden Mountain King reached out his hands and took the war hammer solemnly. He then bowed deeply. "Don't worry, young master. I won't let you down, nor will I disgrace the glory of this divine hammer." After thinking for a while, he tried to ask, "By the way, young master, such an extraordinary divine weapon should have a name. Please give it a name." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Indeed, it should have a name. How about Thor's hammer?" The Golden Mountain King's eyes lit up. He nodded excitedly and said, "Good name. It suits the attributes of this divine hammer very well. Thank you for giving it a name. From now on, this Thor's hammer will be the most precious divine weapon of our tribe." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Yes, use it well. Since you can refine dawn stones and refine divine weapons with them, I have a task for you." The Golden Mountain King put away the Thor's hammer solemnly and said expectantly, "Please give me your orders, young master." Ji Tianqing already had a plan. He said, "Refine 3 sets of armor for me, Yao Yao, and Ku. Refine a pair of divine swords for Yao Yao and a divine spear for Ku." After saying that, he took out 50 dawn stones from his infinite space ring and gave them to the Golden Mountain King. "If there are any dawn stones left after the refining, refine a few more divine swords and divine armors as backups." The Golden Mountain King hurriedly kept the 50 dawn stones and said solemnly, "Don't worry, young master. I will complete the task as soon as possible. However, I am still weak. The divine weapon I refine is like a piece of white paper. Young master, you will have to add restrictions on it personally." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Of course. Next, you will carry out this task first. If everything goes well, I have a more difficult task for you after you complete this task." The Golden Mountain King was interested. His eyes lit up and he asked expectantly, "Young master, what task?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said calmly, "Use a large number of dawn stones to refine a divine battleship." Hearing this, the Golden Mountain King's eyes widened and his blood boiled. He was so excited that his face turned red and his body trembled. He said in a choked voice, "Young master, are you really going to entrust me with such a sacred and great task? Do you really trust me so much? Refine a divine battleship that can travel through the void and traverse the Milky Way. This is a dream that I have never dared to dream of." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He patted the Golden Mountain King's shoulder and encouraged him, "Be confident. I believe you can do it." The Golden Mountain King's blood boiled again. He was so excited that his body trembled. He nodded and said, "Yes, since young master trusts me so much, I will work hard until my death. It's not that serious." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a smile, "Well, you can carry out the task now. I will come to you if I need anything." After saying that, he left the sword world in a flash. The Golden Mountain King stood in the same place. He was excited for a long time before he gradually calmed down. Not long after, he immersed himself in refining weapons again. This time, he was more serious and worked harder than before. Chapter 25:15. Ji Tianqing returned to the distorted spacetime and began the next step of his plan. He did not put away the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Instead, he summoned the 9th Heaven Cauldron. Then, he began to activate the formation in the Divine Cauldron and ignited the Astral Divine Fire. Half an hour later, the temperature in the divine cauldron reached its peak. The astral divine fire also surged to its peak. Therefore, he took out a large number of origin stones and placed them into the divine cauldron. He also placed the sword of burial of heaven inside. Without a doubt, he wanted to use the divine cauldron to refine the sword of burial of heaven. He wanted to fuse the origin stones into the sword of burial of heaven to increase the grade and power of the divine sword. Currently, the sword of burial of heaven was only a low-grade martial god divine weapon. According to the god's classification of divine weapons, this was only a low-grade void god divine weapon. However, Ji Tianqing believed that after the origin stones were fused into the sword of burial of heaven, the quality of the sword of burial of heaven would increase by leaps and bounds. It would definitely surpass the void god level and reach the true god level. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Ji Tianqing stared at the ninth heaven cauldron intently. He formed a divine seal with both hands and continuously used the astral divine fire and the golden light divine seal. The ninth heaven cauldron's formation sped up and began to melt the origin stones and the sword of burial of heaven. This process was very long and would definitely take a long time. However, Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry. He methodically cast his spells to refine the weapon. 1 month, 3 months, 8 months. A year passed quickly. The origin stones had melted. The sword of burial of heaven had also melted into a dark red metallic liquid. Ji Tianqing focused on casting his refining method and fusing the two together. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. 5 years passed quickly. The origin stones were all fused into the sword of burial of heaven, causing its material to change. Its grade also reached the true god level. However, this was not the end. Ji Tianqing continued to cast his divine art and added true god formations and restrictions to the sword of burial of heaven. 1 ray, 2 rays, 5 rays, 9 rays. 10 years later, when Ji Tianqing successfully added the 36th restriction, the refining was finally completed. He stopped casting and recuperated for half a month. The burial of heaven's sword was in the divine cauldron. After being tempered by the divine fire of the stars, it finally took shape. Shwa! Ji Tianqing raised his hand and shot out a golden light, activating the ninth heaven divine cauldron. The sword of burial heaven flew out of the cauldron and floated in front of him, shining with a cold light. On the surface, the burial of heaven was still pitch black, simple, and cold. It hadn't changed much. However, the truth was that the burial of heaven's sword had already been reborn into an origin stone divine sword. The sword became longer and wider, reaching a length of more than 4 feet and the width of a palm. Thousands of exquisite patterns had been added to the blade and hilt of the sword, making it even more mysterious and domineering. Anyone who saw the sword of burial of heaven would be shocked and terrified. Ji Tianqing stretched out his hands and held the sword of burial of heaven in his palms. After carefully examining it for a moment, he smiled in satisfaction. Old friend, congratulations on returning to the true God level. You can roam the galaxy again. As he spoke, the voice of the burial of heaven immediately rang out in his mind. In the future, when I encounter the Heaven Punisher's battleships, I will be able to cut them into pieces like cutting vegetables. Even the dragon subduing general will not be able to block my sharpness. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He said in a playful tone, "Don't worry. We will be able to take our revenge very soon. Even if the Heaven Punisher doesn't dare to make a comeback, I will find them for revenge." At this moment, a fiery red figure sped over from afar. Ji Tianqing put away the sword of burial of heaven and turned around. He saw Ji Ku, dressed in a fiery red dress, rushing over with a straight face. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Ji Ku landed in front of him. She could not wait to say, "Big brother Tianqing, something has happened." What? Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. He placed his hands on her shoulders and asked in a serious tone, "Ku, don't be anxious. Tell me slowly. What happened?" Ji co-organized her thoughts and explained, I just ended my seclusion a few days ago. I left the godly pagoda and went to the Luoshui god nation to deal with government affairs. Just now, Little White sent me a communication jade slip. He said that something has happened to the human race in the Earth's core. I know that you were in seclusion in the godly pagoda and could not receive Little White's message. You must not know about this. I did not want to disturb your cultivation, so I sent Little White a message to ask him what had happened. I could help him solve it. However, Little White refused to tell me the details. He said that you had to go personally. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. He also sent me a message saying that the human race's situation in the Earth's core has stabilized. It has only been 2 months and something has happened again. Why do I have to go and solve it? Could it be that Baer and his son and the high priest want to break away from my control? That shouldn't be the case. With their strength, how could they resolve the hypnotic divine art? Ji Ku also frowned and said worriedly, Brother Tianqing, we all know Little White's personality. He has always been confident and arrogant. If he could solve it himself, he would not trouble you. So I think that he must have encountered something troublesome. Ji Tianqing no longer hesitated. He nodded and said, yes, after I subdued the human race in the Earth's core, I never went back. I will take this opportunity to go and see what is going on. Ji Ku hurriedly took his arm and said in a firm tone, I want to go too. Ji Tianqing thought for a while. Even if the sea of lava was dangerous, it was not a threat to him and Ji Ku. So, he nodded in agreement. The two left the godly pagoda together and rushed to the north of the Heaven's End god nation. After a day and a half, the two arrived at their destination and entered the hidden dragon abyss. Flying along the hidden dragon abyss, the two of them reached a depth of over 1,000 miles and entered the lava ocean. Naturally, the journey was smooth. When the human race guards saw them, they did not dare to stop them. Ji Ku was already a LV3 martial god and had inherited the divine path inheritance of the divine bird. She had become a typical fire element martial god. No matter how dangerous the sea of lava was, it was not a threat to her. She even traveled through the sea of lava like a fish in water. She was very comfortable. Half an hour later, the two entered the Earth's core temple deep in the Black Gold Mountain range. When they entered the cave, Bai Long, Chief Baha, and the high priest were discussing something important. The atmosphere was serious and heavy. Seeing that Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku had arrived, Bai Long's eyes immediately lit up, and he hurriedly came up to greet them. Disciple greets Master and Mistress Mingyue. Ji Ku was stunned. Her face flushed red. She glared at Bai Long and said angrily, Little Bai, don't talk nonsense. Back then, she and Bai Long had followed Kenshin. They were Kenshin's most trusted and closest people. At that time, White Dragon was also a divine monarch like her. He addressed her very intimately and called her Bright Moon. But now, Ji Ku's identity had changed. Bai Long showed a teasing smile and raised his eyebrows. Master's wife, Master and Master's wife have tacitly agreed to this matter, why can't you let it go? I don't dare to laugh at you. I'm sincerely happy for you. You're still talking. Ji Ku glared at him again. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said seriously, Bai Long, what is so serious that I have to deal with it personally? End of chapter. Chapter 25:16. When it came to serious matters, Bai Long immediately put away his joking attitude. He pointed at Ba Er and his son and explained to Ji Tianqing, Master, the matter is like this. Ba Er and his son have been doing their best to carry out the task, and the task of mining the source stone mine is also progressing steadily. However, just 5 days ago, there was an accident in this area. 6 soldiers in charge of mining suddenly disappeared. When Baha Er received the news, he sent 20 guards to check the situation. Unexpectedly, half of the 20 guards also disappeared. The remaining 10 guards hurriedly retreated and came back to report the news. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing knew that there was an accident in the mining process, and not something wrong with Ba Er and his son. He frowned and asked, "I heard that the magma sea is very dangerous. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to investigate." "Bai Long, have you investigated? Why did those soldiers and guards disappear? Did they encounter some fierce beasts or strange beasts?" Bai Long nodded, then quickly shook his head and explained, "Master, after I received the news, I knew that the matter was serious, so I personally took Bai Er and his son to investigate the situation. I searched the area and didn't find any traces of fierce beasts or traps. However, I found a black hole that seemed to be hiding some kind of formation that contained powerful divine power. However, I and Bai Er didn't dare to enter rashly, and we couldn't investigate the formation in the black hole. I vaguely felt that the black hole might involve some kind of secret, so I quickly sent a message to Master's wife and asked you to come in person." Ji Tianqing understood the ins and outs of the matter and nodded slightly. "Bai Long, you did well in this matter. The magma sea is located in the depths of the Earth's core, and the human race in the Earth's core has existed since ancient times. Since a black hole appeared in the magma sea, perhaps there is a formation in divine power. It is most likely related to ancient times. This matter is definitely not a small matter. There is no time to lose. Let Ba Er and his son take charge of the overall situation and don't affect the others mining. Bring me there to see what's going on." Bai Long obeyed and used the human language of the Earth's core cave to warn Ba Er and his son. Then, he led Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku out of the cave. After the three of them flew out of the Earth's core divine palace, they shuttled through the sea of lava and flew straight towards the north. The magma ocean was not flat, and the terrain was also undulating. But in general, the southern terrain was higher, and the magma sea was shallower. The further north they went, the lower the terrain became, and the deeper they went into the Earth's core. The magma sea also became deeper. Ji Tianqing and the other two shuttled through the magma at lightning speed. They were getting closer and closer to the core of the Earth. Unknowingly, a day had passed. The three of them flew for over 200,000 miles and arrived at the depth of 2,000 miles, 400 miles under the lava. In such an environment, not only did they have to endure the terrifying heat, they also had to endure the suppression of the endless magma. The pressure had already reached an unimaginable level. Even if a towering mountain with a radius of several hundred miles were to descend from the sky, it would be nothing more than this. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and White Dragon were strong enough to travel freely in this area. Ji Ku was immersed in the endless lava. His divine body could not help but absorb the power of fire. He did not feel uncomfortable at all. She looked around and could not help but exclaim, "Oh my God! The temperature and pressure here are so terrifying. How would the human warriors in the Earth's core dare to move around here? Wouldn't they be burned to ashes and crushed into meat paste?" White Dragon smiled and explained, "Master's wife, the humans in the Earth's core have lived here for tens of thousands of years. They have long evolved and mutated. Of course, they can adapt to such an environment. Just like the cold and dark depths of the ocean, the pressure is also very strong. But those ordinary fish can still move around in the deep sea. They are not crushed into meat paste." Ji Ku glared at him and said, "Humph. You know so much. There's nothing you don't know." White Dragon smiled proudly and said, "Hee hee, of course. I am the one and only star of wisdom. If Master's wife has any questions in the future, feel free to ask me. I promise to explain everything clearly to you." Seeing how proud he was, Ji Ku frowned and stopped bickering with him. It was the same in her previous life. She had never won against White Dragon. At this moment, Ji Tianqing pointed at a black rock in the sea of lava and asked, "White Dragon, is that the place where the incident happened?" White Dragon hurriedly nodded and explained, "From here, it looks like a huge ore. But in reality, it is a small mountain buried in the lava. It is at least a few dozen miles wide. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Let's go take a look." With that, he led White Dragon and Ji Ku and flew near the black ore. After a moment of close observation, he realized that it was just as White Dragon had said. It was an oval-shaped black rock mountain that was about 50 miles long. More than 70% of the black rock mountain structure was origin stones. The rest was made up of various metals and gems. If we refine this origin stone mine, we will definitely be able to obtain hundreds of millions of standard-sized origin stones, as well as many rare metals and gems. Previously, the amount of origin stones that we obtained from the Earth's core cave was not even 10% of this small mountain. This is a shocking amount of wealth and resources. Ji Tianqing could not help but exclaim. White Dragon also nodded in agreement. If we can move this small mountain of origin stones back, of course, that would be great. However, this small mountain of origin stones is not simple. Master, you should be careful. With that, he led Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku to the other side of the origin stone mine. Master, look. That is the mysterious black hole that I discovered. Ji Tianqing looked in the direction he was pointing. Indeed, he saw a black hole with a radius of 3 meters at the bottom of the origin stone mine. The entrance of the black hole was the same color as the mine. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to notice it. Ji Tianqing slowly approached the black hole and released his divine sense to explore it, carefully inspecting it. However, once his divine sense entered the black hole, it was swallowed by some kind of power. He could not detect the situation inside the hole at all. Interesting indeed. Ji Tianqing was interested. He revealed a look of anticipation and tried other methods. However, after spending 15 minutes and using 6 different divine techniques, he still could not detect the situation inside the black hole. The only thing he could be sure of was that there was indeed a divine-level formation inside the black hole. It constantly emitted powerful divine power waves. However, the divine power he released was completely swallowed the moment it entered the black hole. It did not cause any ripples. Ji Tianqing could not do anything for the time being. He could not move the entire origin stone mine. White Dragon and Ji Ku were also very anxious. They racked their brains to think of a solution. After a moment of silence, Ji Tianqing suddenly thought of an idea. He took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Now that the Sword of Burial of Heaven is a divine weapon made of origin stones, it should be effective. Chapter 25:17. After making up his mind, Ji Tianqing held the Sword of Burial of Heaven and dived into the black hole. As expected, the black hole did not release any mysterious devouring power and the Sword of Burial of Heaven was safe and sound. Therefore, Ji Tianqing released his divine power and instantly shot out dozens of sword gleams towards the formation in the black hole. Bang! 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 The powerful and violent sword gleams slammed onto the invisible barrier of the formation and a series of loud bangs were heard. In the blink of an eye, the sword gleams were shattered and the divine light fragments were devoured. Although his probing failed, Ji Tianqing was not discouraged. Instead, he saw hope. He began to use the Sword of Burial of Heaven as his eyes to observe the invisible formation in the black hole. Under the probing of the Sword of Burial of Heaven, the situation in the black hole quickly appeared in his mind. The two broken but intertwined formation veins quickly became clear. Ji Tianqing carefully observed for a long time. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, revealing a hint of surprise. Those two broken divine formations have surpassed the true God level and reached the heavenly God level. No wonder the black hole is so mysterious. It can block my divine consciousness and devour all divine power. Hearing his two sentences, Ji Ku and White Dragon were stunned for a moment, revealing an expression of disbelief. The five elements world is just a mortal world. How could there be a heavenly god-level formation? Could the ancient legends be true and there were many gods in this world tens of thousands of years ago? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "Of course the ancient legends are true. There's too much evidence to prove it. What we need to consider now is not this problem but how to break the two broken formations." Bai Long frowned and said gloomily, "Master, isn't this too difficult? We're only virtual god level and those are heavenly god level formations." Ji Ku glanced at him and added, "Those are just two broken divine formations." Bai Long retorted, "Even if they're broken formations, they're still heavenly god level formations. How can we break them?" "Master's wife, others may not know what the heavenly god realm means, but how could you not know?" Ji Ku frowned and said unhappily, "Anyway, I believe in Brother Tianqing. He can do it." A bitter smile appeared on Bai Long's face as he shook his head. "Mistress, blind superstition is useless. No matter how heaven-defying Master is, it's impossible for him to break through a heavenly god's formation that's two major realms above him." While the two of them were bickering, Ji Tianqing ignored them and started trying to break the array. He roughly guessed that the two incomplete formations in the black hole were the 18-layer defense formation that had been popular in ancient times. The structure of this kind of divine formation was complicated and contained the mysteries of yin and yang, the five elements, light and darkness. Even an ordinary heavenly god powerhouse might not be able to successfully decipher it. In his previous life, Kenshin had spent his entire life studying the way of the sword. He didn't know much about formations, alchemy, or artifact forging. But even if he only spent his free time researching, he still became a top-notch master of formations, alchemy, and artificing, surpassing many god kings. Coincidentally, he had come across the 18-layer defense formation when he was flipping through an ancient book. Out of curiosity, he carefully read the layout and deciphering method of this kind of divine formation. Now that 1,000 years had passed and he had lived two lives, many of his memories were blurry. However, the sword god had an eidetic memory. The information about the 18-layer defense formation was imprinted in his divine soul memories. Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a long time before he finally found the relevant information from the vast sea of memories. He looked at the pitch-black hole with a serious expression. His left hand formed a seal while his right hand held the sword of burial of heaven, slowly releasing vast divine power. The brilliant golden divine power temporarily reached the level of a true god after being amplified by the sword of burial of heaven. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the dark golden divine power poured into the two incomplete formations like flowing water and started flowing slowly. Soon, 10 breaths passed. The two incomplete formations in the black hole finally reacted. Swoosh! Suddenly, the two incomplete formations lit up with a dazzling golden light and emitted a violent divine power fluctuation. Boom! A violent divine power shockwave burst out from the black hole and hit Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Bai Long hard. Fortunately, the three of them were strong enough. They were only pushed back a few steps and were not injured. Ji Ku and Bai Long were shocked. They looked at the black hole and the two glittering incomplete formations in disbelief. Wow! Wasn't Master too valiant? Those are heavenly god-level formations. If you really deciphered them, the coffins of those ancient god kings won't be able to hold on any longer. Martial gods were only virtual gods. There was a world of difference between true gods and heavenly gods. No matter how powerful a virtual god was, it was impossible for him to cast or decipher a heavenly god-level formation. This was a truth that the ancient gods recognized. If Ji Tianqing could really create a miracle, he would be the first person in history. Ji Ku was also excited. He said excitedly, "Xiao Bai, did you see that? I still believe that there's nothing in this world that can stop Brother Tianqing." Bai Long immediately changed his words and nodded. "Of course. Don't you know who my master is? He's a peerless divine king who dares to compete with the heavens. There's nothing in this world that my master can't do. Ji Kuk glanced at him and smiled mockingly. TSK, that's not what you said earlier. You're such a fickle guy. Bai Long wasn't embarrassed at all. He said seriously, that was a conservative estimate. Always prepare for the worst in advance. That's called being prudent. Moreover, I said that on purpose to stimulate my master's pride and fighting spirit. Only then can I help him create a miracle. How would you understand my good intentions? Ji Kuk glared at him and snorted disdainfully. Humph. Steady and steady. Good intentions. You're not humble at all. The white dragon put on a humble smile and said, I learned all this from my master. He was the one who trained me to be so outstanding. Ugh. You're so shameless. Ji Ku rolled his eyes at him and pretended to vomit. The two of them were fighting happily, but Ji Tianqing was not affected at all. He focused on breaking the formation. Time passed quietly. Soon, 6 hours had passed. The two broken formations in the black hole were finally broken by Ji Tianqing and gradually disappeared. The invisible barrier and devouring force disappeared. The black hole was no longer mysterious and became ordinary. Come, let's go in and take a look. Ji Tianqing stopped and stepped into the black hole with the sword of burial of heaven. Bai Long and Ji Kuk quickly followed and looked around expectantly. The three of them entered the black hole and walked for 3,000 feet before entering the interior of the Origin Stone mine. A spacious cave with a radius of 20 miles appeared in front of the three of them. In the huge cave, the surroundings were pitch black and the air was dead silent. Bai Long waved his hand and released a ball of golden light. It floated in mid-air and illuminated the entire cave. As a result, an ancient and magnificent black stone palace suddenly appeared before the eyes of the three of them. End of chapter. Chapter 25:18. The palace was made entirely out of black stone. It occupied an area of more than 10 miles, and was unusually majestic. At first glance, it didn't look like a palace, but more like an ancient castle. The palace only had 2 floors, but it was more than 3,000 feet tall. Whether it was the stone gate of the palace, or the stairs and stone pillars in front of the door, they were all unexpectedly huge. Ji Tianqing and the other two only felt that this palace was probably not a place where human gods lived, but was built for giants. The square in front of the palace was already damaged beyond repair, and was full of holes and ditches. The walls of the palace were also cracked, and wide cracks and holes could be seen everywhere. Half of the palace on the right seemed to have been smashed by something heavy, and collapsed. Countless black stones fell down, piling up into a few small hills. In front of the palace's main door, there were a few broken, thick stone pillars on the ground. If one looked closely, they would find that the stone pillars and the black stone gate were carved with rough and simple patterns. They were filled with the rough aura of the ancient era. Ji Tianqing stared at the ancient palace, and said with certainty, this is definitely an ancient palace. The aura of tens of thousands of years can't be faked. Bai Long hurriedly agreed and nodded, Master, the architectural style of this palace is obviously from the ancient era, but it doesn't look like the work of a human god. From the layout and aura of the palace, it looks more like a cave or temple of a foreign god. Ji Ku frowned in confusion, and asked, why would a foreign god's temple be hidden in this Origin Stone mine? Could it be that in the distant ancient era, there used to be other races living in the sea of magma in the Earth's core? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, and said, this is only our guess. We have to go into the palace to see the exact situation. I have a premonition that the secrets of the ancient times are hidden in this ancient temple. Bai Long raised his eyebrows, and muttered with interest, a secret from the ancient era? What secret could there be? Could it be the cause and result of the Great War of the Gods? Or, could it be the original appearance of the 5 elements world? Master's wife, do you think it's possible, that in ancient times, the five elements world was the same as the god realm and the dragon realm, they were all eternal main worlds. However, after the War of the Gods, or for some unknown reason, this world fell to become a mortal world. Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku were both stunned for a moment. Then, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. White Dragon, where do you get all these weird ideas from? Little White, it's not that I want to criticize you, but you really dare to fantasize. But why don't you think about it? Isn't this too absurd? Main worlds like the God realm and the Dragon realm exist for eternity. How could they fall to become mortal worlds? White Dragon also felt that it was a little nonsensical. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "Hee hee. I just had a sudden idea. However, we have to make bold assumptions and carefully verify them before we can uncover the truth of the universe." Seeing that he was about to spout nonsense again, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and interrupted him. "Alright, let's go into the palace first and take a look." After saying that, he stepped across the messy and broken plaza and walked towards the main door of the palace. When they arrived at the black stone door that was 100 feet tall, Ji Tianqing looked up at the two tightly shut stone doors and carefully observed the patterns and array patterns on the doors. Ji Ku also stared at the door, looking for the seal array. Only White Dragon looked around and couldn't help but sigh. "Oh my god, the entire palace is made of origin stones. This is too extravagant. I've decided, as long as this palace is useless, I'll move it away." Ji Ku heard him and asked angrily, "Why are you moving it away? Are you going to break the palace into origin stones and keep it for yourself?" White Dragon rolled his eyes and quickly shook his head. He said righteously, "Master's wife, how could I be that kind of person? I'm moving the palace away because I want to renovate it and make it more beautiful. Then, I'll give it to Master as a residence for Master, Master's wife, and Master's wife to enjoy. If you live in a origin stone palace like this, you'll never lack cultivation resources." Ji Ku smiled playfully and said, "Humph, at least you have a conscience." At this moment, Ji Tianqing finished his observation and recognized the seal array on the stone door. He smiled. It's the 18 layers sealing array again. However, it's 3 divine arrays stacked together and there are 54 layers of restrictions. Fortunately, the palace has been around for a long time and the array was destroyed by brute force. Now, only 10% of its power is left. With the previous experience of breaking the array, Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to cast a spell to break the array. This time, his speed of breaking the formation was even faster. It only took him 4 hours to break the grand sealing formation. The White Dragon walked to the door and pressed both of his palms on the stone door, bursting forth with unparalleled power. Ka 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 ka. 2 giant stone doors that were 1,000 feet tall and weighed more than 10 million pounds slowly opened to both sides. As soon as the stone doors opened a crack, a thick turbid air surged out from the darkness behind the door. It was the air current that had been sealed in the palace. After tens of thousands of years of precipitation, the turbid air had formed. It had a strong corrosive power. Ji Tianqing and the other 2 had divine power to protect their bodies. Naturally, they avoided the corrosion of the turbid air. When the door opened to 30 feet wide, White Dragon retracted his palms and made an inviting gesture. Master's wife, please." Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku stepped through the stone door side by side and entered the pitch-black palace. The 2 of them spread out their divine senses and saw that the hall, which was thousands of feet in radius, was unusually spacious. The black stone floor was full of cracks and covered in a thick layer of dust. In the center and 4 corners of the palace, there were more than 10 ancient and rough stone statues that had collapsed. At the head of the main hall in the north, there was a half-collapsed stone platform and a shattered throne. Seeing this scene, Ji Ku couldn't help but mutter, "The palace is a mess. It seems like there was a great battle here." Moreover, it was a battle between immortals. Ji Tianqing nodded. He raised his hand and shot out a beam of starlight into the palace's dome. In the next moment, the pitch-black dome was immediately lit up with densely packed silver light spots. Those light spots were like gems. They emitted dazzling starlight and immediately lit up the entire palace. White Dragon looked up at the dome and said with a smile, "It is indeed the heavenly cycle stellar formation. It is set up with 36,000 stars. This is the standard for a godly king expert to build a palace. Master, this palace is not ordinary. It is most likely the residence of a godly king expert. There is actually a godly king expert living in the core of the five elements realm. This is getting more and more interesting." Ji Tianqing only nodded and didn't say anything. He looked around and walked toward the upper left corner of the palace. There was a pile of shattered origin stones that piled up into a small mountain and covered a wide stone door. Chapter 25:19. With a wave of his hand, Ji Tianqing pushed aside the pile of rubble in the corner. A stone door that was 100 feet tall was revealed. It was tightly shut. There was no sealing array on this stone door. Ji Tianqing pushed it open with a little force. Behind the door was a pitch-black passage that led to the second level of the palace. Ji Tianqing stepped in first and led Ji Ku and Bai Long upward. Although this palace had been asleep for tens of thousands of years, it was basically impossible for people and beasts to exist here. However, the three of them still could not let down their guard. They remained vigilant and alert. Soon, the three of them crossed the passage and entered the second level of the palace. The layout of the second level was similar to the first level. There was also a spacious hall that was surrounded by passages and rooms. Bai Long casually opened a few rooms and saw that they were empty. The ground was filled with rubble. The broken black stones were actually pure dawn stones. His heart ached when he saw this. He put the dawn stones into his spatial ring. Ji Ku looked at this scene and did not say anything. He could not help but snicker. Bai Long did not feel awkward. He said things like, "It's a shame to waste them," in a serious manner. After a while, the three of them walked into the spacious hall. This hall was obviously smaller. The surrounding walls were engraved with reliefs. The patterns had long been blurred and looked very abstract. Ji Tianqing looked around and his gaze fell on the stone platform in the middle of the hall. It was a black stone platform that was 100 meters tall. Ancient words and patterns were engraved on the rock walls. The platform was not flat. The pitch-black stone surface was engraved with patterns that formed an ancient and mysterious array. Ji Tianqing observed it for a while. Then, his figure flashed and flew onto the platform. He stared at the array patterns under his feet for a while. Then, he waved his hand and released 2 rays of starlight into the ancient array. Since ancient times, the gods had always absorbed the power of the stars in the heavens to cultivate. Therefore, for gods of all realms, the power of the stars could be used at any time. Swoosh! The array patterns on the stone platform immediately lit up with dazzling starlight and released a vast wave of divine power. As a result, the entire stone platform began to shake and dust began to fall. Ji Ku and White Dragon were startled awake. They raised their heads and looked at Ji Tianqing, who was on the high platform, with worried and expectant expressions. "Tianqing Gige, you have to be careful." "Master, what array are you going to activate?" Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He concentrated on releasing the power of the stars and activating the mysterious array. Soon, half an hour had passed. The tens of thousands of lines on the high platform flickered with silver light, blooming with a dazzling radiance. Buzz! The dazzling brilliance of the stars suddenly gathered together, forming a 3-meter-tall silver door. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. As expected of the work of a godly king expert, a divine array from the primordial era can still be successfully activated. Ji Ku and White Dragon quickly flew to the high platform and came to Ji Tianqing's side. The two of them looked at the silver door with a doubtful and expectant expression. Tianqing Gij, is this a teleportation array? Master, how do you know this is a teleportation array and that it can be activated successfully? Ji Tianqing pointed at the array patterns beneath his feet and explained, a divine array that can be preserved from the primordial era and can be activated successfully is definitely above the heavenly god tier. However, I don't know where this teleportation array leads to yet. White Dragon smiled and said, isn't that simple? Why don't we go in and take a look? As he spoke, he was about to step into the teleportation door. Ji Ku quickly stopped him, Little White, don't be so reckless. What if you're teleported into a hopeless situation? White Dragon chuckled and said, what if I'm teleported into a shocking treasure trove? Ji Ku snorted and said, humph. Then go ahead. I won't stop you. White Dragon naturally would not enter the teleportation door rashly. He turned to look at Ji Tianqing and asked, Master, what do you plan to do? Ji Tianqing said calmly, what else can we do? We can only go in and take a look. However, everyone should be careful just in case. White Dragon quickly nodded to show that he understood. Ji Ku said confidently, don't worry, Tianqing Gij. Even if we're really in danger, I can bring you all back to the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower instantly. Ji Tianqing had the small golden tower and could also escape from a hopeless situation. Therefore, he had enough confidence. He did not waste any more time and stepped into the silver door first. Swoosh! A silver light flashed and Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared. Ji Ku and White Dragon quickly followed and entered the silver door. Their figures were swallowed by the silver light. In the next moment. In a pitch-black, ice-cold void. Swoosh! Starlight flashed and Ji Tianqing's figure appeared out of thin air. Then, 2 more silver lights flashed and Ji Ku and White Dragon appeared. The 3 of them stood in the void and looked around before looking down at their feet. They saw that they were surrounded by a vast and boundless void. It was cold and dead silent. In the darkness extremely far away, there were specks of starlight twinkling. Those were the stars in the sky. Under their feet was an incomparably huge dark yellow star. It was because the 3 of them were too close. They were less than 100,000 miles away from that star. As a result, when they looked down, all they could see was a boundless dark yellow color. A vast and boundless aura hit them in the face. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and carefully observed the star below. White Dragon was also shocked and exclaimed in disbelief, oh my god, that teleportation array just now directly threw us into the void. Master, how far are we from the 5 elements world? How do we get home? Ji Ku's observation was more detailed. He pointed at the dark yellow star under his feet and persuaded, Little White, we have long been used to things like traveling through the void. Don't make a fuss. However, that star is obviously dozens of times smaller than the 5 elements world. At a rough glance, the star is a barren desert. There seems to be no signs of life on it. I really don't understand why that teleportation array is connected to this place. Ji Tianqing said calmly, don't worry, it's very easy to go back. Let's take a look at this star and see what secrets it has. With that, he led Ji Ku and White Dragon and flew down to the star below. Swoosh! The 3 of them flew through the void as fast as lightning and landed on the star after 6 hours. As they saw, this star was barren and without the protection of the celestial wind and fire layer. As far as their eyes could see, there was an endless desert all around them. In between, there were sand dunes of varying heights and the desert that had been eroded by the passage of time. Perhaps there were many mountains and rocks in the desert, but they had been eroded and turned into gravel over the long years. The 3 of them sped through the desert and tried their best to explore this strange star. After all, there are traces of a great battle in the ancient divine temple. Master, your imagination is truly unrestrained, and your observation skills are also unparalleled. You have seen through everything. To be able to deduce the truth just by looking at the surface, and to be able to restore the situation to its original state. Your disciple is truly impressed. By Long's expression, he was very serious. Ji Ku rolled his eyes and muttered disdainfully, "Pft, bootlicker." Bai Long pretended not to hear her. He smiled at Ji Tianqing and asked, "Master, since you've grasped the truth, can we go back? After all, we've been away for a month. The plan to mine the origin stones will be affected." Ji Ku finally understood. He pointed at Bai Long and said, "Ha, you despicable guy. How dare you trick your master?" Bai Long was exposed and smiled embarrassedly. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said calmly, "Since you don't want to explore anymore, let's drop this matter. Although we didn't gain anything from coming to this barren planet. However, this is equivalent to giving us a path to choose. If we can't ascend in the future, we can use the teleportation array to come to this planet. From here, we can cross the void and find the nearest mortal world. We can then ascend from that world." Ji Ku nodded in agreement. Bai Long was startled and asked doubtfully, "Master, this is indeed a path to ascension for the other martial gods of the five elements realm. But it shouldn't be of much use to us, right? Didn't you use that divine tool to ascend back then?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, "That's right. Back then, I used the space-time roulette to forcefully break the world's seal and open the path to ascension. Thus, I became the only person to ascend from the five elements realm in tens of thousands of years. Unfortunately, the space-time roulette was destroyed in the great battle before I died. I stored the shattered pieces of the roulette in the Yang tomb and can no longer use it." It turned out that Kenshin had stored a shocking treasure in the Yang tomb. Apart from the drop of divine king blood, there was also a space-time roulette. However, Ji Tianqing was well aware that it was a damaged divine tool. Thus, he didn't open the Yang tomb, nor did he think of taking out the space-time roulette. "Ah!" Bai Long cried out in surprise, revealing a look of deep disappointment. Ji Ku thought for a moment and smiled, "This is the will of the heavens. If the space-time roulette is destroyed, we won't be able to ascend. However, we accidentally discovered the primordial shrine and came here through the transportation formation. This is the other path of ascension that the heavens have arranged for us." Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement. Using the space-time roulette to bring the two of you up is actually very dangerous. I almost failed back then. Although I didn't lose my life, I was heavily injured and on the verge of death. After ascending to the dragon realm, I was unconscious for an entire half a year. Fortunately, that old dragon saved me and woke me up. Now, it's easy. Once we break through to the true God realm, we can ascend from other worlds and won't have to take such a big risk. If we use the space-time roulette to ascend again, I can't guarantee that we'll succeed." Hearing this, Ji Ku immediately revealed a look of guilt and said with a voice full of pity, "Big brother Tianqing, if I knew that you would have to endure such pain and danger back then, I wouldn't have." Bai Long also lowered his head in embarrassment and scratched his head. "Back then, Mistress and I were hiding in the sort of burial of heaven to cultivate and didn't know what happened. I really didn't think that Master would endure such danger for us and almost lose his life." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a smile, "All right, let's not talk about this anymore. What happened back then won't happen again. In this life, we'll have to rely on our own strength to ascend." Only then did Ji Ku and Bai Long pull themselves together and nodded confidently. "Let's go back." Ji Tianqing summoned the small golden pagoda and cast a holy golden light that covered him, Ji Ku, and Bai Long whoosh. The golden light flashed and the three of them disappeared from the sky above the desert. In the next moment, the three of them crossed the endless void and returned to the five elements world. They appeared in the Jyotian Ten Absolutes Tower in the Yin-Yang realm in the north of the Divine Ruins. Chapter 25-21 In the 5th level of the 9 heavens 10 absolutes tower. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianqing and the other two appeared on the demon god altar. The celestial star formation on the ceiling shone with cold starlight, illuminating the three of them. Bai Long looked around and revealed a surprised smile. He praised, "We were still in the depths of the void a moment ago, and now we're back in the divine tower. This is amazing." Ji Ku took over and nodded. "This way, it'll be very convenient for us to go back and forth to that star." Bai Long's face fell. He mumbled, "Master's wife, are you still planning to go back to that star?" Ji Tianqing nodded. "Of course, but that's a matter for the future." Then, he looked at Bai Long with a serious expression and ordered, "Bai Long, return to the human race in the Earth's core cave now. Continue to take charge of the situation and supervise them in mining the origin stone mine. As for those missing people in the Earth's core cave, they must have been swallowed by the black hole and killed by the heavenly god-grade formation. You have to find a way to calm everyone down. Just say that those missing people accidentally entered the forbidden area and met with misfortune." Bai Long quickly nodded and said seriously, "Don't worry, Master. I'll definitely take care of this matter. As for that origin stone mine, I'll set up a divine formation to protect it and make it a forbidden area. No one will be allowed to go near it." "All right, go then." Ji Tianqing nodded and waved his hand to activate the origin divine formation. "Master, these are the origin stone mines we collected in the past 6 months. I'll give them to you now." Bai Long took out more than 300 pieces of coarse and huge black ores from his interspatial ring and handed them to Ji Tianqing. Then, he bowed to Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku before stepping into the origin divine formation. Swoosh! With a flash of light, Bai Long was sent out by the divine formation. Ji Tianqing put away the origin stone mines and returned to the distorted spacetime with Ji Ku to cultivate in seclusion. The following days were very dull. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yunyao spent 80% of their time cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime. As time passed, the strength of the three continued to increase, breaking through one level after another. In their free time, if Yunyao and Ji Ku were not cultivating in seclusion, they would deal with the government affairs of the Luoshui God Nation. Their various strategies allowed the Luoshui Divine Nation to quickly recover, and they also received the love and respect of the Divine Nation's citizens. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, was quite busy. When he wasn't cultivating, he was either dealing with the affairs of the Tianqing Divine Kingdom or researching origin stones. After many years of research, he had discovered more than 10 uses of origin stones, and all of them had been verified. Back then, the Jinshan King only took 3 months to complete the task he had given him. He, Yunyao, Ji Ku, and the White Dragon all received a set of origin stone armors. In addition, Yunyao received 2 origin stone divine swords, Ji Ku received an origin stone divine spear, and the White Dragon received a long saber. The long saber's appearance was a little strange, and its aura was mighty and domineering. According to the Jinshan King, it was a custom-made origin stone divine saber strictly according to the White Dragon's request. After the divine saber was refined, the White Dragon was very surprised and couldn't bear to part with it. He even gave the saber a strange name, the Green Dragon Crescent Saber. When Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku heard about this, they were puzzled and asked the White Dragon why he gave it this name. The White Dragon just smiled mysteriously and said the word feelings, and didn't explain further. Seeing that he was acting strange, Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku didn't ask further. Ji Tianqing took some time to refine a huge amount of origin stones and gave them to the Jinshan King, asking him to start building the origin stone divine ship. This was a serious matter, and the Jinshan King was unusually serious. He and Ji Tianqing discussed for 7 days and 7 nights before finalizing the ship's appearance, structure, layout, weapons, and so on. As for the divine array required for the ship, Ji Tianqing would have to add it in later stages. Furthermore, this was a huge project, and it would take at least a few years to complete. The Jinshan king did his best to complete this task, and he even mobilized the strength of his entire clan. He didn't dare to slack off in the slightest. Furthermore, the situation on Shinwu continent had stabilized. The three divine kingdoms were established, and all the major races lived in peace. There were no more wars, and the commoners were able to live and work in peace. The martial arts world, which had gone through a calamity, welcomed a flourishing development. Every year, many martial arts geniuses appeared out of nowhere, and a few martial saints had also appeared. After hearing this news, Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and the others were very gratified. If things continued like this and Shinwu continent didn't face any more calamities, it would be great. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing knew that this was impossible. After a short period of peace, Shinwu continent would likely face an even greater crisis. Thus, the task of hunting down and killing the Heaven's Conqueror never stopped. The three divine kingdoms had sent out 200,000 experts to search for the survivors year after year. Over the course of 6 years, the three divine kingdoms had found over 100 surviving Heaven's Conquerors and killed them all. As a result, there were less than 30 Heaven's Conquerors left on Shinwu continent, and it was impossible for them to cause any more trouble. The matter of encircling and killing the Heaven's Conquerors had temporarily come to an end. However, the plan to suppress the demons at Dark North Mountain would never end. Over the past 6 years, the various empires would often train their soldiers and head to Dark North Mountain for actual combat. The martial arts world's adventurers and ambitious people would often enter and exit Dark North Mountain to train themselves in battles against the demons. Many of the demon tribes had been exterminated, and their population was constantly decreasing. For the next 100 years, the demons would not be able to rise again, much less threaten Shinwu continent. The summer of the 7th year. On a bright, starry night, Yun Yao had just finished dealing with matters in her divine kingdom and had returned to Jiutian 10 Absolute's tower. Just as she entered the distorted spacetime, Ji Tianqing flew over. Yun Yao hurriedly stopped and asked with concern, "Tianqing, are you preparing to go out?" Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, "It's been almost a year since I've contacted the White Dragon. I need to send him a message and have him send some origin stones over. The Jinshan king doesn't have enough." After a pause, he asked, "Yao Yao, you just finished dealing with matters in your divine kingdom. You must be tired, right?" Yun Yao gently shook her head. "Such a small matter can't tire me out. However, Fairy Yuqing sent me a message again, asking about the world seal." "Oh." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and smiled. "This is the 3rd time she's asked you about it in the past 7 years. It seems like she's getting impatient." Yun Yao nodded and said with some regret, "It's a pity that it's useless for her to be impatient. Even though I've reached the 8th level of the martial god realm, I still don't have any clues, nor do I have the ability to remove the seal." Ji Tianqing nodded. The deity who placed the seal might not have been Goddess Yaoguang. Moreover, only divine lords and god kings have the ability to seal a world. Even if you break through to the true god realm, it's still impossible for you to do so. I think that you should tell her the truth earlier so that she won't have to wait so bitterly. End of chapter. Chapter 25-22. Tell her the truth. Isn't that a little cruel? Yun Yao frowned, as she could not bear to do so. After hesitating for a moment, she said, "Why don't we tell her about the primordial shrine?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and said calmly, "Using the ancient teleportation array to reach outer space, there is indeed hope for ascension. However, the prerequisite is that she has to break through to the true god realm." Yun Yao's eyes dimmed, and she nodded. "That's right. Fairy Yuqing is already old, and her time is almost up. I'm afraid that there is no hope for her to break through to the true god realm. Unless I give her some origin stones to help her quickly increase her strength. Perhaps then she will have a chance." When she thought of this idea, her eyes suddenly lit up. Ji Tianqing hesitated for a moment before nodding. That's good too. After all, she has helped us before, and she is also a kind person. He understood that Yunyao had merged the memories of Luo Shui and Yaoguang's spirits, so she had feelings for Fairy Yuqing. As a disciple, how could she bear to see her master wait for death in despair? Therefore, Ji Tianqing did not object to this matter. Yunyao looked at him with a burning gaze and said sincerely, Tianqing, thank you for understanding and supporting me. Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. It's just a small matter, don't take it to heart. Alright, go ahead and do it if you want to. Yunyao nodded and waved goodbye to him before turning to leave the distorted spacetime. She wanted to personally return to Tianhai to deliver the origin stones to Fairy Yuqing. Ji Tianqing also left the tower and sent a message to the White Dragon. 15 minutes later, he returned to the 6th level of the distorted spacetime and continued his closed-door cultivation. However, before he started cultivating, his emotions were somewhat complicated, and many thoughts flashed through his mind. It has been 8 years since the Heaven Punisher clan was defeated. The situation in Shinwu continent has stabilized, and many hidden dangers have been eliminated. We have obtained a large number of origin stones and powerful origin stones as well as divine artifacts. Our strength has also increased continuously. Now, Yao Yao has reached the 8th level of the martial god realm, and I have broken through to the 7th level. Ku and Bai Long were both in the 6th degree realm, while Qian Yu and Black Dragon were in the 5th degree realm. Even Huang Long had broken through to the martial god realm after obtaining a large number of dawn stones. Based on the current situation, even if the dragon subduing general were to make a comeback, he would only be facing death. But why do I always feel uneasy? Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's worry in the depths of his mind grew even stronger. He muttered to himself, I've already found the path of ascension. Should I try my best to increase my strength and break through the true God realm as soon as possible and ascend to the upper realm? However, I'm going to ascend soon. Who can protect the 5 elements world? If the experts of the Heaven Punisher race return, who will be able to turn the tide? Ji Tianqing did not want to be the guardian of the 5-element world. He would not treat protecting the 5-elemental world as his mission and responsibility. However, his family and friends were all in this world. It was impossible for them to ascend with him. He was unwilling, and even more unwilling, to see everyone die miserably under the butchering blades of the Heaven Punishers. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing hesitated. If not, I can only postpone the ascension and help everyone increase their strength first. I'll try my best to teach them some divine skills to increase their combat strength and their ability to protect themselves. After making up his mind, he found Ji Ku, Qian Yu, and Hei Long who were cultivating in seclusion and taught them a few profound and powerful divine skills. He also sent out a jade slip with 2 divine skills recorded in it and gave it to Huang Long who was far away at Sky Pillar Mountain. In the next half a year, he carried out this plan and helped everyone increase their combat strength. After he was done with this, he began to cultivate in seclusion. Yunyao had also taken care of various matters. She was cultivating in the distorted space to break through to the 9th level of the martial god realm. At the same time, in the center of the Purple Heaven Galaxy, on the huge and prosperous Purple Heaven Star, the war that had lasted for 50 years had finally ended. The purple light barrier that enveloped the entire Purple Heaven Star was riddled with holes and a few huge gaps had appeared. Originally, Purple Heaven Star had 6 continents and more than 30 kingdoms. Every kingdom was glorious and prosperous with a strong foundation. They also had 2 or 3 martial gods guarding them. However, in the war that had lasted for 50 years, the Purple Heaven Star's experts kept dying. By now, almost 90% of the martial gods from the 6 continents had died. Even a few peak martial gods who had been living in seclusion were forced to show themselves and fight. Their fates were self-evident. They had all died tragically under the siege of the Heaven Punisher's fleet. Purple Heaven Star had lost the protection of the god-level experts and was naturally defeated. As for the core forces below the martial god realm, they had also suffered a devastating blow. Billions of elite experts from various continents had sacrificed their lives to protect Purple Heaven Star and resist the Heaven Punisher's invasion. Purple Heaven Star had been completely defeated. The martial artists from various tribes could no longer resist the Heaven Punisher's attack and were about to be enslaved by the Heaven Punisher. Although the Heaven Punisher had also suffered heavy casualties in the war and had paid a heavy price, the Heaven Punisher's fleet had suffered heavy casualties. More than 70% of Marshal Nan Jinnan's 16 fleets and 350,000 elite soldiers had died. Now, there were only 100,000 soldiers left and they could barely form 6 fleets. However, they had won and all the sacrifices were worth it. Taking over Purple Heaven Star was equivalent to taking control of half of Purple Heaven Star Zone. In the next few hundred years, Marshal Nan Jinnan would firmly take over Purple Heaven Star and use it as his base camp to gradually develop and expand his forces. The hundreds of worlds in the Star Zone would become his territory. After the Holy Barrier was broken, the Heaven Punisher's fleets drove straight in and entered Purple Heaven Star. Under the command of Marshal Nan Jinnan, the 6 fleets rushed to the 6 continents and took over the territories as quickly as possible. Each fleet had 16,000 soldiers and they were basically all martial sages. Among them, there were almost 100 martial gods. After they had taken over a continent, they quickly took control of the various holy kingdoms and the leaders of countless cities and turned them into puppets that they could manipulate at their will. In just half a year, the fleets had taken control of a continent and gained a firm foothold. Next, the Heaven Punisher would establish a new order and system and enslave the people of various tribes to gather wealth and resources for the Heaven Punisher. At the same time, they sent out thousands of elite soldiers to suppress the forces that resisted. Based on the current situation, it would take at most a few years for the fleets to completely take control of the 6 continents. The forces that resisted would also be destroyed and the situation would stabilize. At that time, Purple Heaven Star would completely become the Heaven Punisher's territory. The martial artists and people of various tribes on the 6 continents, a total of 300 billion people, would become the Heaven Punisher's slaves. As long as the Heaven Punisher was not destroyed, they would never be able to rise again. To the people of Purple Heaven Star, a dark and cruel era had arrived. Chapter 25-23. 10 months later, the situation on Purple Cloud Star was settled. The famous Purple Heaven Cave had also been taken over by the Southern Expedition Marshal and had complete control over it. This cave that was high up in the astral wind and fire layer was connected to Purple Cloud Star and the Void. It was the cave of Heavenly Venerate Zi Shao. Heavenly Venerate Zi Shao was the most powerful person on Purple Cloud Star. He was once the leader of the 6 overlords. He was 48,000 years old and had reached level 8 True God Realm. It was very likely that he would break through to the Heaven God Realm. However, in the battle 2 years ago, the Southern Expedition Marshal had led many captains to kill him. Because of Heavenly Venerate Zi Shao's death, the fall of Purple Cloud Star accelerated. The Southern Expedition Marshal had spent a lot of manpower and resources to transform Purple Cloud Cave into his own cave. He was in charge of Purple Cloud Cave and controlled the entire Purple Cloud Star. That evening, in the Purple Cloud Cave, the Southern Expedition Marshal was handling government affairs in the main hall. Suddenly, the guard at the entrance of the main hall reported loudly, reporting to the Grand Marshal, "General Long Fu wishes to see you." Hearing the guard's voice, the Southern Expedition Marshal was stunned for a moment before he put down the things in his hands. Long Fu. Ever since this guy returned, he has been recuperating for many years. Now that the situation on Purple Cloud Star is settled, why is he here to see Benshui? Could it be that he wants a share of the loot after seeing the various fleets dividing the 6 continents? The Southern Expedition Marshal frowned as his lips curled into a playful smile. Let him in. The guard at the entrance of the main hall acknowledged the order and quickly let him in. After a while, General Long Fu, who was wearing golden armor, stepped into the main hall. He walked to the spacious stone platform and stood still. He bowed to Marshal Jinan and said respectfully, "Subordinate Fu Long pays his respects to the Grand Marshal." The Southern Expedition Marshal sized him up and raised his eyebrows. He said calmly, "Long Fu, it seems that you haven't wasted your time in the past few years. Not only have you recovered from your injuries, but you have also advanced by one level." Indeed, General Long Fu had not only recovered from his injuries, but his strength had also reached level 9 Martial God Realm. His aura was even more unfathomable. He nodded and said in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing, "Grand Marshal's eyes are as sharp as torches. You were able to see through this subordinate's facade with just one glance. It is truly admirable." Marshal Nan Jinan said expressionlessly, "Fu Long, now that the situation has just stabilized, Ben Shui still has too many things to deal with. If you're only here to pay respects to Ben Shui, you can leave now." He even forgot what he had wanted to say. Seeing his reaction, General Dragon Fu heaved a sigh of relief and smiled in relief. He knew that he was not far away from success. Therefore, he did not wait for Marshal Nan Jinan to ask and took the initiative to introduce, "Marshal, when I invaded the Five Elements world, I enslaved human martial artists to mine for resources underground. Unintentionally, a group of slaves dug up this black stone in the depths of the earth. After I got the stone, I used a secret method to refine it and found that the God Stone contained pure God power and powerful space power. Therefore, I named it Boundless God Stone. This God Stone, which has never been seen before, is stronger than ordinary God Stone. Not only is the material 100 times stronger, but the God power is also 100 times stronger." Marshal Nan Jinan nodded slightly and said without raising his head, "Ben Shui has conquered so many worlds and plundered countless resources, but I have never seen this God Stone." General Dragon Fu continued, "I have studied it carefully. The Boundless God Stone has many uses. Not only can it be used to refine real divine weapons, but it can also be used to forge warships. Think about it, if we add this Boundless God Stone when we forge warships, what will the effect be?" Marshal Nan Jinan answered without hesitation, "Not only will the warships reach the true God level, but they will also have powerful space power and can achieve space crossing and continuous teleportation. This way, our fleet will be like a tiger that has grown wings, and we will be able to conquer the universe even faster." "That's right." General Dragon Fu revealed a look of anticipation and said excitedly, "Therefore, I risked my life to escape back to the Purple Cloud planet to report this news to you." Marshal Nan Jinan put down the Boundless God Stone in satisfaction and asked in a serious tone, "Fu Long, how many Boundless God Stones do you have?" General Dragon Fu replied, "Originally, I had 9, but I used them all to reward the soldiers and win their hearts. I only brought 1 back." Marshal Nan Jinan nodded and asked, "Then have you estimated how many Boundless God Stone can be produced in the Five Elements world?" Chapter 25-24. Dragon Subduing General thought about it seriously before shaking his head. "This item came from underground, so I can't estimate it either. But I'm sure that the number of boundless divine stones is beyond our imagination." South Conquering Marshal frowned and said unhappily, "Beyond your imagination? Isn't that the same as not saying anything?" Dragon Subduing General hesitated for a moment before patting his chest and saying, "I can guarantee that there are at least 100,000 pieces, 100,000 pieces." South Conquering Marshal's eyes flashed as he muttered, "If there are really so many, Ben Shui can build a super warship." His current warship was only a mid-grade true god warship. If he could get 100,000 pieces of boundless divine stones, the super warship he built would definitely surpass the true god level. That was a true god level warship. From now on, not only would he have inexhaustible divine power, but he would also be able to traverse the universe and travel through countless starfields. Thinking of this, South Conquering Marshall's heartbeat sped up. But he could still maintain his calm. He looked at Dragon Subduing General and asked in a low voice, "Dragon Subduing, if you don't have 100,000 pieces, how are you going to explain yourself?" Dragon Subduing General gritted his teeth and said firmly, "If you don't have it, I'm willing to commit suicide to atone for my sins." In fact, he himself could not estimate how many boundless divine stones there were in the Five Elements world. But for revenge and to gain South Conquering Marshall's appreciation, he decided to go all out. South Conquering Marshall looked at him with a dignified gaze and nodded. "Very good. Since you have such determination and courage, Ben Shui will give you a chance. 10 days later, Ben Shui will personally lead 100 warships to the Five Elements world. Go back and prepare well. Ben Shui looks forward to your performance in the future." 100 warships meant that there would be at least 10,000 heaven-conquering warriors and 100 martial god realm captains. In addition to South Conquering Marshall going personally, the combat power of this fleet could be said to be terrifyingly strong. Dragon Subduing General's wish was finally fulfilled. He was instantly excited and quickly bowed. "Thank you for your help and trust, Marshal. I will serve you wholeheartedly and not let you down." South Conquering Marshall did not say anything else and waved his hand, indicating for him to leave. The Dragon Subduing General bowed and bade farewell, leaving the hall in satisfaction. Not long after, the Southern Expedition Marshal issued an order and began to mobilize the troops. In just a few days, hundreds of warships had arrived from various continents and gathered at Purple Heaven Cave. 10 days later, the Southern Expedition Marshal's affairs were settled. He led hundreds of battleships into the starry sky and headed straight for the world of Five Elements. Dragon Subduing General's status also rose and he was able to enter the warship of the Southern Expedition Marshal, following beside the Grand Marshal. The distance between Zixiao Star and the Five Elements world was very far. Even if the fleet traveled at full speed, it would take at least a year to arrive. Making use of this chance, Dragon Subduing General introduced the structure and style of the Five-Element world to South Conquering Marshal. Furthermore, he also taught the Southern Expedition Marshal the languages of the human and demon races. In this way, the Southern Expedition Marshal didn't feel bored, and time passed quietly. 3 months, 8 months, 1 year, unknowingly, 14 months had passed. The fleet led by the Southern Expedition Marshal finally approached the Five Elements world. 500,000 miles in front of the fleet, there was a huge shining golden star floating quietly in the void. A day later, the fleet arrived outside the Golden Light Barrier and stopped. Dragon Subduing General followed the Southern Expedition Marshal to the deck of the warship and observed the Golden Light Barrier. "Grand Marshal, this is the spatial barrier that seals the world of Five Elements. It is said to be the work of the ancient gods. Our fleet is unable to pass through the barrier and can only look for gaps and cracks." Dragon Subduing General pointed at the Golden Light Barrier and took the initiative to introduce. The Southern Expedition Marshal nodded slightly and asked, "When you led the fleet here, you entered through the spatial crack?" Dragon Subduing General nodded. The Southern Expedition Marshal frowned and asked again, "When you escaped from the world of Five Elements, you used the Liao Kong plate to break through the spatial barrier?" Dragon Subduing General nodded again and explained patiently, "Grand Marshal, the reason why I was able to break through the barrier wasn't because of the Liao Kong plate, but because of the Realmless Divine Stone. It was the spatial power of the Realmless Divine Stone that tore through the spatial barrier. However, we only have one Realmless Divine Stone now and are unable to create a large enough crack for the fleet to enter." The Southern Expedition Marshal ordered, "Pass down Ben Shuai's order. Immediately send out a scout team to find the spatial crack." Dragon Subduing General hurriedly returned to the warship and passed down his order. Soon, 10 pitch-black warships flew out of the vast fleet and headed to different places. The Southern Expedition Marshal and the others waited patiently in the warship. This wait lasted for 2 months. On the 63rd day, a warship sent back a message saying that they had found a spatial crack that the fleet could enter. Hence, the Southern Expedition Marshal led the fleet over. A month later, the fleet arrived near the spatial crack. Only then did the Southern Expedition Marshal realize that there was a black crack that was 5 kilometers long on the Golden Light Barrier. Hence, hundreds of warships lined up and passed through the spatial crack, entering the world of 5 elements. Swoosh! With a flash of red light, the Marshal's warship passed through the spatial crack and appeared in a barren mountain range. Immediately after, there was another flash of red light behind and dozens of warships appeared. After 100 breaths of time, all the warships entered the world of 5 elements and gathered in the sky above the mountains. Everyone looked around curiously, their hearts filled with anticipation. All around them were undulating mountain ranges that were thousands of meters tall, and the gray sky was filled with dark clouds. There were not many forests or trees in the mountain range, and all they could see was grayish-brown soil and rocks. Such a barren scene disappointed the soldiers, and they began to mutter and talk about the dragon-subduing general behind his back. However, the Southern Expedition Marshal was very calm and did not seem to be in a hurry. He led the fleet across the mountains and flew towards the south. After 2 hours, the dragon-subduing general observed the scenery along the way and finally determined their location. "Marshal, we are in the northern part of the Shinwu continent, the most mysterious and dangerous forbidden area, the primordial ruins of gods. Although this place is very barren and dilapidated, it was the battlefield of the ancient gods and has been destroyed. Furthermore, there is a cemetery of the gods in the depths of the ruins. It is said that after a god from the world of 5 elements falls, a corresponding tomb will appear in the cemetery." The Southern Expedition Marshal's interest was piqued. "Oh. There is such a place. Even if a god who has ascended to the higher realms falls, it should have nothing to do with this world, right?" The dragon-subduing general shook his head and said solemnly, "I am not sure about this. After all, I have not had the chance to enter the cemetery to study the tombs." The Southern Expedition Marshal smiled confidently and said, "When Ben Shui has taken over this world, it will not be too late to slowly study it." End of chapter. Chapter 25-25. Whoosh! More than 100 pitch-black warships were arranged in a triangular formation, streaking across the sky like ghosts. As the fleet flew over the mountains, a dark red hurricane of death swept across the land. All living creatures in the mountains, regardless of whether they were birds, fish, insects, demons, or beasts, would die instantly and turn into black ash. Even powerful monsters that had cultivated for hundreds of years would be reduced to dust if they were swept by the dark red hurricane. Such a tragic and strange scene caused many living creatures to panic. The nearby birds and beasts fled in panic, causing chaos and tremors in the mountains. Seeing this scene, many of the heaven-conquering army's soldiers laughed heartily, finding it amusing. Inside the Marshal's flagship, Marshal Nan and General Fu Long were discussing an important matter. "Fu Long, what's your first target?" General Fu Long's eyes flashed with hatred, and he lowered his head. "Reporting to Marshal, it's the Luoshui Divine Nation." "Why?" Marshal Nan raised an eyebrow. General Fu Long explained, "Back then, I conquered the Luoshui Divine Nation and enslaved billions of humans. Originally, I planned to rest for 10 years before conquering the other 2 divine nations and gradually controlling the entire Shinwu continent. Once I controlled the Shinwu continent, conquering the other continents would be very easy. However, Ji Tianqing and his wife wantonly assassinated my soldiers and ruined my plans. They even joined forces with the emissary of the divine ruins and Fairy Yuqing to kill my soldiers and severely injure me, forcing me to escape from the 5 elements realm." Marshal Nan nodded to show that he understood. "So, you want to kill Ji Tianqing and his wife first, invade the Luoshui Divine Nation, and then get rid of the emissary of the divine ruins and Fairy Yuqing?" General Fu Long quickly nodded and said solemnly, "That's right. There are only a few martial gods left in the Shinwu continent, and the 4 of them are the strongest. As long as we get rid of them, no one will be able to stop us, and the entire world will fall. The Southern Expedition Marshal remained calm and didn't take this matter to heart. After all, to him, they were just a few martial gods, and he could destroy them with a wave of his hand. He was more concerned about the boundless God Stone. Fu Long, where did you get the boundless God Stone? General Dragon Subduing was stunned for a moment before replying honestly, within Heaven Extinction God Nation. Marshal Nanjing said in a dignified tone, then go to Heaven End God Nation and find the source of the boundless divine stone first. As for those human martial gods, there was no need to worry about them. Their lowly lives are far less important than the boundless divine stone. The dragon subduing general hesitated for a moment. Although he was unwilling, he could only follow orders. Thus, he gave the order for the fleet to change direction and fly towards the Heaven End God Nation. In the depths of the ruins of God. The ancient gazing platform was still floating in the sky, exuding an ancient aura. At this moment, a human male in fiery red armor galloped over from the south and landed on the ancient viewing platform. This person was the commander of the divine guards of the Tianqing Divine Kingdom. He had come on the orders of Divine Lord Tianqing to deliver something. He took out a black box half the height of a person from his spatial ring. According to Divine Lord Tianqing's instructions, he placed the box on the ancient viewing platform, released a signal arrow, and left. A moment later, his figure disappeared into the horizon. A black figure gradually appeared in the sky above the ancient gazing platform. It was a tall old man dressed in a black robe. His body was translucent, and he seemed to be in between illusion and reality. He landed on the ancient gazing platform and looked down at the mysterious black box. Seeing the patterns and markings on the box, he immediately understood, and a hint of a smile flashed across his eyes. Ji Tianqing, that brat, sent me a message saying that he has a divine item that can help me increase my strength quickly. From the looks of it, this is the divine item that he sent over. As he muttered, the black-robed elder shot out a golden light from his right hand and unlocked the seal on the box. After opening the box, he saw that there were dozens of irregular black stones in the box. Although the stones looked ordinary, the black-robed elder's pupils constricted, and he revealed a look of shock. He reached out with both hands in disbelief and picked up a black stone, turning it over and over to observe it. It's hard to believe that he actually gave me a box of divine stones. This is a rare treasure in the world, a divine item that is far more valuable than a divine artifact. No wonder he dared to boast. The divine power contained in these divine stones is indeed amazing. After muttering to himself, the black-robed elder suppressed his surprise and calmed down. He put the box of divine stones into his interspatial ring and prepared to leave. He planned to go into seclusion for a while to test the effects of these mysterious divine stones and see how powerful they were. However, just as he turned around and stepped into the sky, his footsteps suddenly stopped. He felt that there was a strong sense of danger approaching, so he turned his head and looked to the north. However, the north was peaceful as usual. The black-robed elder frowned and slowly closed his eyes, releasing an invisible divine sense. His divine sense spread out like mercury and quickly spread to the north. Soon, it covered a radius of 7,000 miles. He immediately saw that in the mountains 7,000 miles away, there were countless demons and giant beasts frantically fleeing. The various demons and beasts that usually hid underground and in the mountains would not show themselves. At this moment, they were all out, mingling together and fleeing in panic. Looking at the situation, it was as if they were being chased by an ancient demon. The black-robed elder sensed that something was wrong, so he crossed the sky 150 miles in one step and flew toward the north. In the blink of an eye, he had flown 20,000 miles. At this moment, he saw a huge black shadow at the end of the horizon. It was streaking across the sky. The black shadow was triangular in shape and formed by hundreds of black dots that glowed with a dark red light. Even from a few thousand miles away, the black-robed elder could feel the fierce killing intent and powerful pressure. His pupils constricted, and his gaze became as cold as ice. It's the Heaven Punisher's fleet. Damn it! It's been 10 years, and the Heaven Punisher is coming back. The black-robed elder was the messenger of the ruins of God. He had fought with the Heaven Punisher before, so he naturally recognized the Heaven Punisher's battleships and their aura. Ji Tianqing had warned him a few years ago that the Heaven Punisher might come back for revenge. He had also thought of this and was slightly worried. However, he had not expected that his and Ji Tianqing's worries would come true. The Heaven Punisher had come so quickly. Moreover, the number of battleships had reached a shocking 100. Shenwu continent was about to face another calamity. The emissary did not hesitate to take out 3 transmission jade slips and send them to Ji Tianqing, Fairy Yuqing, and Martial God Taihao. The Heaven Punisher's fleet was about to invade, and he needed to gather the strength of many martial gods to resist. After sending out the messages, the emissary was still worried and muttered to himself, "This won't do. Even if Ji Tianqing and the others receive the news and rush over, they won't make it in time. I need to think of a way to delay the Heaven Punisher's fleet. I can't let them leave the ruins of God." Chapter 25-26. Whoosh! The emissary of the divine ruins disappeared in a flash and flew toward the fleet of the heaven-attacking tribe. Even though his strength had reached the LV-8 martial god realm, he could look down on the world. He was not afraid of any of the heaven-attacking tribe's top powers. However, he knew that he had no chance of winning against the hundreds of heaven-attacking tribes' battleships. It was impossible for him to fight the fleet head-on. It was not that he did not have the courage, but it would be meaningless. He would not be able to stall for time. Therefore, he remained invisible and caught up with the heaven-attacking tribe's fleet. After following the fleet for a long time, the emissary of the divine ruins attacked decisively after figuring out the situation. Sky overturning seal. He raised both of his hands and formed a profound divine art. Surging divine power erupted and formed a giant golden divine seal. Whoosh! The seal formed by tens of thousands of inscriptions instantly covered an area of 600 miles and enveloped the entire fleet. The seal absorbed the divine power of heaven and earth and unleashed a powerful force that blasted toward the hundreds of battleships. Instantly, a terrifying force that seemed to be able to turn the world on its head exploded in the sky. The fleet that was flying at high speed was instantly stopped. The hundreds of black battleships were sent flying. They rolled and collided with each other, creating loud bangs. The entire fleet was instantly thrown into chaos. Dozens of battleships fell from the sky and crashed into the mountains and the ground. Several towering mountain peaks were smashed to pieces, and dozens of deep pits were smashed into the ground, causing dust to splatter everywhere, covering the sky and the sun. Only the southern conquering marshal's battleship remained balanced in the sky. The remaining hundreds of battleships were either lying on the ground in a disorderly manner, or crashing around in random directions. Seeing this, the emissary of the divine ruins sneered. However, he did not show himself. He remained invisible and hid in the sky. His gaze was attracted to the leading battleship. He sized it up without blinking. The battleship was 2,000 feet long. It was pitch black and had a cold metallic luster. It gave off a powerful pressure. The battleship had a strange shape. Its sharp bow looked like a bird's beak. The ship had a streamlined body and 2 wide fan-shaped wings. The edges were densely packed with sawtooth and sharp blades. The tail of the battleship was also like a feather, spreading out like a fan, the edges of the arc flashing with a sharp cold light. The emissary of the divine ruins frowned and muttered to himself, "This warship is clearly the leader of the fleet." After being hit by this old man's sky-flipping seal, it only shook a dozen times but did not fall. It seemed like the grade of this battleship was even higher than the martial god grade, possibly reaching the true god grade. Could it be that, the heaven-conquering fleet invading Shenwu continent has a true god powerhouse overseeing it? At the thought of this, his expression suddenly changed, and his eyes were filled with deep worry. If that's the case, then Shenwu continent is in danger. At the same time, the dozens of warships that had fallen on the mountains and the ground were rejuvenated and flew back to the sky. Even though the attack just now had injured many soldiers of the heavenly expedition. However, the warship was very sturdy and was not destroyed. It was only slightly damaged and did not affect its flight or combat. Many of the warships quickly quieted down and arranged themselves in a formation in the sky, vigilantly guarding their surroundings. Many of the martial god captains released their formless consciousness and covered the surrounding 1,500 kilometers to search for traces of the enemy. Tens of thousands of soldiers of the heaven-conquering fleet were also ready to set off, their bodies bursting with intense battle intent. As long as they found the enemy that had secretly attacked them, they would bravely pounce over and tear them to pieces. In the Marshal's flagship, many black-armored soldiers were on high alert. The Southern Expedition Marshal and General Dragon Subduing were in the middle of a discussion when they were interrupted by a violent tremor. Both of them realized that the fleet had been attacked by a powerhouse, and they immediately frowned as cold killing intent flashed in their eyes. General Dragon Subduing gripped his pitch-black greatsword and said with a gloomy expression, "Damn bastards. We haven't even gone to find them for revenge, but they've already attacked us. These reckless bastards are really seeking their own deaths." Although he said this, he was secretly delighted. The Grand Marshal had not allowed him to take revenge immediately, but he had wanted him to find the source of the boundless divine stone first, so he had no choice but to obey. Now that a martial god powerhouse had taken the initiative to come to him, the Grand Marshal would definitely not let him off. He would use this opportunity to crush the other party and eliminate the hatred in his heart. The Southern Expedition Marshal was very calm. He was neither flustered nor angry. He said indifferently, "Dragon Subduing, go and see what's going on." General Dragon Subduing bowed and said, "Grand Marshal, the fleet has been attacked by a martial god powerhouse, but the losses are not great. The other party is hiding in the dark and attacking. I will go and find them now." With that, he turned and left the hall, flying out of the battleship. He held his great sword and stood at the bow of the ship. His consciousness spread out like mercury and carefully searched the surrounding 1,000 kilometers. However, the surrounding 1,000 kilometers was silent and there was nothing unusual. He frowned and released his consciousness again, expanding the search range to cover a radius of 1,500 kilometers. After 100 breaths, he searched the surrounding 3,000 kilometers but still found nothing. He did not believe it and expanded the search range to a radius of 9,000 kilometers. This was already his limit. His consciousness could only search such a large area. However, he still did not find any traces or aura of the enemy. Which bastard is it? How could he hide so well? Or maybe he ran away after attacking. General Dragon Subduing frowned and cursed with hatred. It's most likely that bastard Ji Tianqing. He is the most sinister and despicable. He is used to using such methods. Then, he transmitted his voice to the captains of the various battleships to ask if they had found any traces of the attacker. Over 100 captains replied one after another, but they all found nothing and did not find anything unusual. General Dragon Subduing's expression became increasingly ugly. He stood at the bow of the ship for a moment before returning to the battleship. Arriving in front of Marshal Jinan, he respectfully reporting to Marshal, "This subordinate and all the captains have searched and found no trace of the attacker." The Southern Expedition Marshal raised his eyebrows and asked in a low voice, "Was it an attack by an expert or accidentally entered a formation? Or was it because of other reasons?" General Dragon Subduing replied with certainty, "I have searched carefully. There is no formation here and it was not caused by some divine artifact. Someone attacked secretly. However, the other party fled far away after attacking." The Southern Expedition Marshal's expression was a little gloomy. After a moment of silence, he ordered, "Pass down the order. Continue forward." Thus, the fleet rearranged their formation and continued to fly toward the heaven-end God nation. However, what everyone did not expect was that just as the fleet flew 1,000 kilometers, they were attacked by a mysterious expert again. The side of the fleet lit up with red flames that shot into the sky, and there was an earth-shattering explosion. Chapter 25-27. Boom! There was a deafening explosion as a dark red fireball with a diameter of more than 1,000 feet exploded on the side of the fleet. The dark red heavenly fire instantly engulfed more than a dozen battleships. The dozens of battleships around were sent flying by the force of the explosion. They rolled and crashed into the other battleships. After a series of explosions, the fleet was thrown into chaos again. The 14 battleships that were engulfed by the heavenly fire were burned red and the temperature was high. They fell to the ground and smashed the 2 mountains into ruins. The soil was burned into dark red lava. The soldiers in the battleships only had the strength of a martial sage. They could barely resist the burning of the heavenly fire and they were all seriously injured. What was more terrifying was that the raging heavenly fire contained the power of the spiritual soul. The soldiers were so dizzy that they almost fainted. In a short period of time, the more than 1,000 soldiers in the 14 battleships did not have much combat power. Only the 14 captains who were at the martial god realm could resist the burning of the heavenly fire and the impact of the spiritual soul. They were not hurt. After all, the battleships had neutralized most of the power. Even so, the 14 captains were still shocked and roared angrily. Swoosh! Swoosh! They escaped from the red battleships and flew into the sky with their swords and sabers. They looked around for the culprit. However, all directions were covered by a monstrous fire. They released their spiritual senses and could only see that the mountains and the ground were in a mess. There were more than 30 battleships in the sky and they were rolling and falling to the ground. From those battleships, the angry roars of the warriors and captains could be heard. However, there was no trace of the attacker. The people cursed angrily. A few captains even took out their sacred weapons and used a special secret skill to search for the attacker. Marshal Nan Zheng's battleship and dozens of other battleships that were not attacked stopped in the sky. Many captains flew out and discussed angrily. They were trying to find the culprit. In an instant, the entire fleet was in chaos. Everyone was angry and irritable. No one could bear to be attacked twice in a row. This was an intolerable provocation and humiliation. However, the most infuriating thing was that the attacker was hiding in the dark and they could not find him. This time, the Southern Expedition Marshal was also furious. He furrowed his brows and looked at General Fu Long with a dark expression. His tone was cold as he said, "Fu Long, didn't you say that the attackers have already escaped?" This General Dragon Subduing was instantly embarrassed. He lowered his head in fear and trepidation, looking like he was admitting his guilt. "Please calm down, Grand Marshal. It's my fault for not being able to find the culprit behind the sneak attack." Marshal Nan Zhennan looked ahead with a sharp gaze and said in a playful tone, "You're already a LV9 martial god, but there's still someone hiding nearby and hiding from your divine sense. It seems that those martial gods are not as weak as you said. This 5 elements world is indeed a little interesting, worthy of Benshui personally making a trip." As he spoke, Marshal Zhennan strode outside. General Dragon Fu hurriedly followed up and said, "Grand Marshal is right. Although the 5 elements world is small, there are many hidden talents. Especially that Ji Tianqing. After all, he's the reincarnation of the Supreme Being from 1,000 years ago. Only you can kill him." Marshal Nan Zhennan curled his lips and sneered. "If he's the attacker, that's great. Benshui would also like to see how the Supreme Being who rules over the 9 heavens looks like." As they spoke, the two of them walked out of the battleship and came to the deck. Marshal Nan Zhennan closed his eyes and released an invisible divine sense. It turned into billions of ripples and spread out in all directions. He was a true God realm expert and was fundamentally different from a martial god, empty god. Regardless of whether it was his physical body or spiritual soul, they had been tempered by the laws of heaven and earth and had reached the realm of eliminating the false and retaining the true. Even though he had only released his divine sense and did not use any divine skill to attack. General Dragon Fu stood beside him and also felt a great pressure. He could not help but shrink his neck and lower his head. As Marshal Nan Zhennan's divine sense spread out, a cold and murderous aura shrouded the area. In just 2 short breaths, Marshal Nan Zhennan's divine sense had seen through everything. Regardless of whether it was a secret skill, a disguise using divine power, or a folded alternate space, nothing could escape his detection. He suddenly opened his eyes and turned his head to look to the left. A cold light flashed across his purple eyes and he sneered. He. So it's an old man. I don't think it's Ji Tianqing. General Dragon Subduing followed his gaze and saw that the sky to the left was abnormally calm and empty. However, he believed that Marshal Nan Zhennan had seen through the other party's disguise. At the same time, the messenger of the divine ruins, who had used a divine skill to hide in an alternate space, suddenly shook. He had thought that the divine skill he had mastered was very magical and that no martial god would be able to discover him if he hid in an alternate space. Thus, he had been hiding in the wings of the battleship and looking for an opportunity to attack. It was only when Marshal Nan Zhennan appeared that he was alerted. When he saw General Dragon Fu following behind Marshal Nan Zhennan, he realized that Marshal Nan Zhennan's strength and status must be higher than General Dragon Fu's. As expected, Marshal Nan Zhennan released his divine sense and immediately locked onto his aura. Marshal Nan Zhennan's sharp gaze was like a real sharp blade. It pierced through thousands of feet and locked onto him, causing his hair to stand on end and a chill to run down his spine. *T. That guy saw through this old man's secret technique and locked onto this old man's soul. His aura is so strong. He's definitely not a martial god. He must be a true god. The messenger of the divine ruins was shocked. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, his nerves tensed up. After coming back to his senses, he did not hesitate to use a divine skill to escape through an alternate space. However, Marshal Nan Zhennan had expected him to escape and sneered. He, you've been discovered by Benshui and you still want to escape. Old man, you're too naive. As he sneered, Marshal Zhennan raised his right palm and punched the sky. Kaboom! A thunderous sound exploded from the 9th heaven. The calm sky was shattered into pieces, revealing a black hole with a radius of 100 miles. Crimson-red heavenly fire poured down like a flood. The pitch-black astral winds also formed dozens of tornadoes, whistling as they came. The messenger of the divine ruins who was shuttling through the alternate space and trying to escape was also sent flying. After all, the sky had been shattered and the alternate space had been cut off by Marshal Nan Zhennan. The messenger of the divine ruins flew out from the black hole and was enveloped by the heavenly fire as he fell towards the ground. In mid-air, he spat out a mouthful of dark red blood. Without a doubt, he had been injured by Marshal Nan Zhennan. Even if he was an 8th-stage martial god, in front of a true god like Marshal Nan Zhennan, he was extremely weak. The difference between the two realms was only one word, but the difference in strength was huge. End of this chapter. Chapter 25-28. In the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda. The 6th level's distorted spacetime was as quiet as ever. Ji Tianqing had just ended his 40 years of closed-door cultivation. His strength had broken through to the 8th level martial god realm and his combat power had increased by several times. After ending his cultivation, he got up and flew towards the depths of the distorted spacetime. Not long later, he flew to Yun Yao's side and stopped. Yun Yao, who was dressed in a white dress, was sitting in the space-time, quietly circulating her energy to regulate her breathing. She did not go into closed-door cultivation. Instead, she seemed to be thinking about something and was very engrossed. Ji Tianqing looked at her bulging tummy and his gaze became much gentler. He muttered to himself, "A long time ago, Yao Yao said that our children are about to be born. Now it seems that Chen Chen and Yaya will be born very soon." Thinking of this, he opened his mouth and woke Yunyao up. Yunyao ended her thoughts and opened her eyes to look at him. She said with a gentle expression, "Tianqing, you're here, looks like your strength has broken through again." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked with concern, "I've just broken through to the 8th level martial god realm. What about you? Before I went into closed-door cultivation, you had already reached the 9th level martial god realm." Yunyao gave a bitter smile and shook her head, "Although we have a huge amount of source stones, I've already reached the bottleneck. Even after 40 years of closed-door cultivation, I've only reached the peak of the 9th stage realm. I'm still unable to break through to the true god realm." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and comforted her, "Don't be anxious. From the martial god realm to the true god realm, there's a gap between heaven and man. It's an extremely difficult gap to cross. Moreover, this is the interior of the god pagoda and it's isolated from the heavenly Tao. To break through to the true god realm, you must go through the tempering and test of the laws of heaven and earth. Perhaps if you cultivate outside the god pagoda, your chances of breaking through to the true god realm will be higher." Yunyao nodded to show that she understood. "All right, wait until I've accumulated enough foundation and have the confidence to break through, then I'll go outside the god pagoda to try." Ji Tianqing asked with anticipation, "Yao Yao, our children are about to be born, right?" Yunyao lowered her head and caressed her bulging belly with both hands. She smiled gently and said, "Yes. The two little fellows have been in my womb for hundreds of years, and they are finally about to be born. Just now, I was thinking about this, and I had a premonition that they would be born within a year at most." Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up, and he said with joy, "Born within a year? That's great. Yao Yao, you've worked hard all these years." Yunyao smiled and said, "It's all worth it." Ji Tianqing pulled her hand and reminded her, "Since the children are about to be born, you should rest well first. After they are born, you can try to break through to the true god realm. I still have some matters to attend to, so you can rest here." Yunyao nodded and waved goodbye to him. Ji Tianqing turned and left, leaving the god pagoda very quickly. Shwa! With a flash of golden light, he appeared at the peak of the barren mountain outside the yin-yang realm. It was evening, and the setting sun in the sky was as red as blood. Gray clouds rolled in the sky, and heaven and earth were filled with a heavy and oppressive aura. Ji Tianqing frowned and muttered subconsciously, "There's such an ominous phenomenon. Is something big going to happen?" After saying that, he was about to take out his communication jade slip and ask Bai Long to send more dawn stones back. All these years, the Golden Mountain King had been working hard to build the divine battleship without slacking off. He had used up a lot of dawn stones, and he did not have many left. However, just as he was about to take out his communication jade slip, a stream of light flew from the sky and landed in front of him. Swish! Ji Tianqing raised his head and saw that it was a communication jade slip. There was a special symbol carved on it. A message from the old man of the divine ruins? He raised his eyebrows with a trace of doubt. He reached out and grabbed the communication jade slip, and his divine sense entered it. The next moment, the old man of the divine ruins' deep and majestic voice sounded in his mind. Ji Tianqing, the heaven punishers are back. A fleet of more than 100 battleships has appeared in the divine ruins. Come and help us. These two short sentences contained too much information. Ji Tianqing's expression changed immediately, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Damn it! The heaven punishers are back. The invading fleet is even bigger this time. There are more than 100 battleships. Ji Tianqing frowned, and his mood was heavy and oppressive. He did not hesitate to send a message and asked Bai Long to settle the matters of the human race in the Earth's core cave and immediately return to the divine ruins. Then, he returned to the Jiutian Ten Absolutes Pagoda and quickly gathered Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Long, and Qian Yu. After everyone gathered, Ji Tianqing announced the invasion of the heaven-punishing fleet. Suddenly hearing this news, everyone's hearts tightened, and they felt a great sense of danger and pressure. Yun Yao said with a serious expression, 10 years ago, when General Fu Long escaped, Tianqing had already predicted that this day would come. That's why we've been trying to find origin stones all these years and desperately raising our strength to prepare for this day. Since the heaven-punishing fleet is here, what are we waiting for? It's time to show our strength. Ji Ku nodded in agreement and said with a serious expression, fortunately, the heaven-punishing fleet appeared in the divine ruins and not in the three divine kingdoms. Otherwise, the people would have been in a terrible situation. We must hurry over to help the emissary of the divine ruins and stop the heaven punisher's fleet. We must not let them leave the divine ruins. Ji Tianqing said in a dignified tone, everyone has been conserving their strength for so many years. It's finally time to use it. Take your origin stones and divine weapons. We'll set off now. Ji Ku took out his origin stone armor and long spear. After putting them on, he looked valiant and extraordinary. Bai Long and Qian Yu also put on their special origin stone armor to protect their vital points. Yun Yao also took out her armor and 2 swords and was about to put them on. Ji Tianqing quickly dissuaded her, Yao Yao, our child is about to be born. Don't go. Stay here and wait for our news. Ji Ku, Bai Long and Qian Yu also tried to persuade her to stay in the divine tower to recuperate. Yun Yao naturally disagreed. She shook her head and said, at this critical moment, how can I let all of you fight a bloody battle while I hide in the divine tower? You don't have to persuade me anymore. I want to go through thick and thin with all of you. I believe that Chen Chen and Yaya will support my decision. Since Yun Yao was determined, no one tried to persuade her anymore. Ji Tianqing hesitated for a moment before he nodded and said, all right, let's go together. Then, the group left Jiutian Ten Absolutes Tower and rushed to the central region of the divine ruins. The 3 of them and the 2 divine beasts' strength had reached LV6 martial god realm and they were protected by origin stones. Their speed was as fast as the aurora and they covered 1,000 miles in an instant. However, Ji Tianqing still felt a little regretful. He could not help but think, it's a pity that my divine worship is not complete. If I had an origin stone divine worship, my speed would be doubled and my combat strength would be even stronger. Chapter 25-29. The Yin-Yang mystic realm was in the northernmost part of the ruins of God. The ancient viewing platform was in the central part of the ruins of God. The 2 places were hundreds of thousands of miles apart. Ji Tianqing and the others used the power of the origin stones to teleport. In just 10 hours, they arrived at the central part of the ruins of God and were not far from the ancient viewing platform. While they were on their way, Ji Tianqing received 2 more communication jade slips from Martial God Taihao and Fairy Yuqing. The contents of the messages were basically the same. They were all related to the heaven-defying fleet. Martial God Taihao and Fairy Yuqing also knew about this and were rushing over at full speed. When Ji Tianqing and the others arrived near the ancient viewing platform, they found that the surroundings were calm. There were no traces of a battle within a radius of 20,000 miles. Seeing this scene, everyone was a little puzzled. However, no one doubted the words of the messenger of the ruins of God. They believed that he would not lie. Ji Tianqing guessed that the messenger of the ruins of God might be following the heaven-defying fleet and had already left the ancient viewing platform. Therefore, he sent a message to the messenger of the ruins of God to ask about the location and the situation. After a full 100 breaths, the messenger of the ruins of God replied. Ji Tianqing took the communication jade slip and used his divine sense to enter it. The messenger of the ruins of God's low and hoarse voice sounded in his mind. Ji Tianqing, wait for me near the ancient viewing platform. I am dealing with the heaven-defying fleet and leading them to the ancient viewing platform. Act according to the situation. The messenger of the ruins of God's voice was a little weak, as if he had suffered a serious injury, but he was still holding on. Ji Tianqing frowned when he realized something was amiss. A hint of worry flashed across his eyes. He put away the communication jade slip and said to everyone, "The old man of the ruins of God has stalled the heaven-defying fleet alone and is seriously injured. He will soon lead the heaven-defying fleet here. Let's meet him here." After saying that, he pointed to the ancient viewing platform and said, "Before the heaven-defying fleet arrives, let's set up an ambush on the ancient viewing platform and give them a surprise." Everyone understood what he meant and nodded in agreement. Then, everyone came to the ancient viewing platform and began to set up a divine array. Ji Tianqing wanted to set up a true god-killing formation on the ancient gazing platform to deal with the heaven-conquering fleet. With his and the others' strength, it would have been impossible to complete the task in a short period of time. It would have taken at least a month. However, he generously took out 300 dawn stones and placed them around the ancient viewing platform as the foundation of the divine array. In this way, the origin stones would provide a vast amount of true god-level energy. He and the others only needed to set up the formation. Swish! Swish! With Ji Tianqing as the leader, he stood on top of the ancient gazing platform and formed a seal with his hands, shooting out a golden and silver light that blotted out the sky. Thousands of gold and silver light ribbons rained down on the ancient viewing platform. Yin Yao, Ji Ku, Qian Yu, and the Black Dragon also cast their spells. According to Ji Tianqing's instructions, they constructed the veins of the divine formation. This was a complicated and tedious project that did not allow for the slightest mistake. Everyone was focused on setting up the divine formation with all their might. Their efficiency was extremely fast. In a short 15 minutes, the foundation of the divine array was completed. Half an hour later, the complicated veins were also completed. An hour later, the divine array was basically completed. Ji Tianqing and Yin Yao cast another 100 spells and completed the divine array. Swish! A dazzling 5-color divine light burst out from the ancient gazing platform. It was even more dazzling than the sun and it emitted a destructive energy wave. Soon, the divine light that blotted out the sky disappeared and retreated into the ancient gazing platform. After everything returned to normal, the divine array was completely set up and hidden in the ancient gazing platform. Ji Tianqing was pleased. He sneered and said, "Everyone, disperse and hide to rest. When the sky-conquering fleet arrives, this 9-change galaxy array will teach them an unforgettable lesson." Everyone quickly dispersed and retreated thousands of miles away, hiding around the ancient gazing platform. Everyone, including Ji Tianqing, used a secret art to hide their divine power and waited patiently. In a short 15 minutes, the sky in the east lit up with a bloody light. Then, a loud rumbling sound could be heard. Everyone turned to the east and saw a blurry black shadow flying towards them like an aurora. Behind the black shadow, there was a black cloud that covered the sky and was chasing after it relentlessly. Everyone looked carefully and saw that there were over 100 pitch-black warships in the black cloud. The leading battleship was extremely large, like a ferocious black bird. The giant bird's sharp beak kept shooting out dark red light beams towards the black shadow that was escaping in front. Boom! 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 The dark red pillar of light blasted into the sky, shattering it into countless black holes and cracks. Heavenly flames and gusts of wind poured out of the spatial rifts like torrential floods. That black shadow seemed particularly small, dodging left and right in the sky, fleeing in a sorry and dangerous manner. The fleet that was like a black cloud was like a ferocious primordial devil that was brimming with killing intent. It charged at Li Yao with terrifying pressure. Both sides were quickly approaching the ancient viewing platform. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing, Yin Yao, and the others' hearts also gradually rose. They knew that the black shadow that was desperately escaping was the severely injured messenger of the ruins of God. They couldn't help but worry that if the messenger of the ruins of God didn't have enough power and couldn't dodge the dark red light beams, he would definitely end up in a miserable state. Fortunately, the messenger of the ruins of God didn't disappoint them. After a short while, the messenger of the ruins of God flew above the ancient viewing platform. He didn't stop at all and flew over the ancient viewing platform without hesitation. It was as if he didn't see the ancient viewing platform at all. Swoosh! After flying over the ancient viewing platform, the messenger of the ruins of God sped up and fled forward. The mighty sky-conquering fleet also arrived above the ancient viewing platform and flew over without stopping. After all, the southern conquering marshal and general dragon only had eyes for the messenger of the ruins of God. They didn't realize, nor did they think that there would be any mysteries behind that ancient stone platform. The southern conquering marshal and general dragon were standing on the deck at the bow of the ship and looking ahead with cold smiles. Seeing the messenger of the ruins of God's miserable appearance, the southern conquering marshal laughed contemptuously. "Coward! Run faster!" His thunderous voice reverberated in the sky. The southern conquering marshal was speaking the human language. Although his accent was a bit awkward, everyone understood. The messenger of the ruins of God turned his head and looked at him with a mocking smile. The southern expedition marshal frowned and had a bad premonition. General Dragon's heart also skipped a beat and he muttered, "This old thing has been beaten half to death by us and is running all over the place. How dare he still?" Before he could finish his words, the simple and unadorned stone platform below suddenly burst into a brilliant light that soared into the sky. Whoosh! 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 The moon-white stone platform released tens of thousands of five-colored light blades and giant starry swords that instantly covered a radius of 100 miles. The hundreds of battleships in the entire fleet were instantly engulfed by the five-colored light. Chapter 25-30. Boom! 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 A deafening boom exploded in the sky, resounding through the 9 heavens. Every battleship had been hit by at least a few hundred attacks. There were star swords that were 1,000 feet long, divine flame light pillars that were 100 feet thick, five-colored light blades and large axes. There were even a few thousand five-colored divine lightnings. The Galaxy 9 Changes array was one of the more powerful killing arrays among the true God arrays. When Ji Tianqing had set up the array, he had added many different types of divine powers to allow the holy array to explode with such terrifying power. In the blink of an eye, over 100 battleships had been thrown out and crashed into one another. Every battleship was riddled with holes and cracks. Their energy was leaking out crazily. There were also many soldiers of the Heaven Expedition in black armor that fell out of the gaps and cracks. Their fates were obvious. They had all been killed by the Galaxy 9 Changes array and nothing was left of them. Even Marshal Nan Zheng's battleship had been thrown out and it had smashed a few battleships before coming to a stop. The heavens and the earth were in chaos. The screams and roars of the soldiers of the heaven-conquering army resounded throughout the universe. This was only the first wave of attacks from the Galaxy 9 Changes array and it had caused the heaven-conquering fleet to suffer heavy losses. Over 80 battleships had been severely damaged. The lighter ones were covered in wounds and the more serious ones were twisted. Over 1,000 Marshal Sage Realm soldiers in black armor had been killed by the array and their corpses had been destroyed. The sudden change caused the soldiers of the heaven-punishing army to panic. Marshal Nanjing and General Long Fu were enraged and killing intent shot out from their bodies. That D*MNB* starred. He actually set up an ambush here and deliberately led us into a trap. Marshal Nanjing saw that the fleet had suffered heavy losses and he was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He clenched his fists tightly. Previously, He had thought that victory was within his grasp and he had acted like a cat playing with a mouse. He had not even been in a hurry to kill the messenger of the holy ruins. He had only wanted the messenger to walk towards his death in despair. Now, he had paid the price for underestimating the messenger of the holy ruins. This was a slap to his face. The dragon-subduing general's gaze pierced through the divine light and stared at the messenger of the divine ruins 200 miles away. He cursed in a sinister tone, "Sinister and despicable old thing, I will definitely tear you into pieces." After saying that, he said to the Southern Expedition Marshal beside him, "Grand Marshal, the messenger of the ruins of God has been running for his life, so he definitely won't have the chance to set up an ambush here. Besides, the formation on the ancient gazing platform had obviously surpassed the martial god realm, and had reached the true god realm. Therefore, I suspect that he has a helper." Marshal Jinan looked at him coldly and asked, "Didn't you tell Benshui that that old thing is the strongest person on Shenwu continent? Apart from him, who else can set up a true god-level grand array?" This General Dragon Subduing was speechless and didn't know how to explain. At the same time, the ancient viewing platform lit up with dazzling five-colored light as the second round of attacks erupted. Tens of thousands of saber lights and sword shadows, as well as lightning and fire pillars, bombarded the 30 or so battleships. At the sight of this scene, General Dragon Subduing's eyes narrowed as he revealed an expression of realization. "Grand Marshal, I understand now. There are no true gods on this continent, so they can set up a true god-level grand array by relying on the boundless god stone. I have already sensed the aura of the boundless god stone on the ancient gazing platform." "I see." Marshal Jinan nodded slightly and said coldly, "It seems that they have already discovered the effects and power of the boundless god stone, and they have also found the source of the stone." General Dragon Subduing sneered, "This way, we can save ourselves the trouble. We only need to capture them and interrogate them." Marshal Jinan nodded and waved his hand to order, "Pass down the order, get everyone to stay away from the ancient gazing platform. Benshui wants to see what other methods they have besides that true god-level grand array." In fact, after the heaven-conquering fleet had been ambushed by the divine array once, they had all fled in all directions. Only 30 or so battleships had been attacked twice by the divine array, and their fates were very miserable. Those battleships had been distorted and cut into pieces, turning into piles of scrap metal that fell to the ground. More than 2,000 black-armored soldiers had been killed, and more than 1,000 soldiers had been lucky enough to survive, but they were also seriously injured. Only the 30 or so captains of the martial god realm had only suffered minor injuries and could still continue to fight. Following Marshal Jinan's order, the 60 or so battleships retreated to a distance of 200 miles. The 30 or so captains also retreated, flying to the sides of the marshal's flagship and standing still. The 1,000 or so soldiers of the heaven-conquering fleet who were seriously injured had met with a disaster. In the process of their retreat, the Milky Way 9 Changes Grand Array launched its third attack. Following a series of loud bangs, the 1,000 or so soldiers were swallowed by the five-colored light and blasted into pieces of flesh and blood, dying on the spot. After the five-colored light dissipated, the world regained its calm, but the pungent smell of blood still lingered in the air. The heaven-conquering fleet stopped in the sky 200 miles away, in a vigilant and alert posture. Marshal Jinan, General Dragon Subduing, and more than 30 captains stood on the deck of the flagship, staring at the messenger of the divine ruins in the distance. The messenger of the divine ruins stopped running and stood in the sky above the ancient viewing platform, facing off against the heaven-conquering fleet. "Ha ha ha! Bastards of the heaven-conquering fleet, how does it feel to be ambushed?" The messenger of the divine ruins laughed coldly, his tone full of contempt and provocation. General Dragon Subduing more than 30 captains were enraged, their eyes surging with murderous intent. "Marshal, please allow us to fight. We will definitely capture that old thing alive and let you do whatever you want with him." General Dragon Subduing bowed and asked for permission to fight in a serious tone. Marshal Jinan raised his hand and looked sharply at the messenger of the divine ruins. He shouted loudly, "Human worms of the five elements world only have this much ability. These are just some despicable tricks, yet you are so proud of them. Old thing, listen carefully. Benshui was the Marshal Jinan, who led millions of soldiers under the heaven-conquering emperor. He was the current master of the Purple Cloud Star Zone. Even the most powerful Purple Cloud Star had become Benshui's property. A mere five elements world would soon be under Benshui's feet. Let me give you one last piece of advice. Admit your guilt and surrender obediently, and Benshui might spare your lowly life." Although his human language was a bit lame, his voice was filled with murderous intent. His aura was majestic and domineering. His voice reverberated in the sky, containing supreme divine power, causing everyone's divine souls to tremble. The messenger of the divine ruins' expression changed slightly, and a trace of seriousness flashed across his eyes. Only now did he know that the galaxy outside the five elements world had undergone such a drastic change. However, he was not afraid and said proudly, "What heaven-conquering fleet? What master of the star zone? You are just a group of uncivilized beasts. I am just a tomb keeper. You can't even do anything to me. What right do you have to invade the five elements world?" End of chapter. Chapter 25-31. The Southern Expedition Marshal was not in a hurry to attack, and the messenger of the divine ruins was happy to stall for time. Taking this opportunity, he quietly took a healing pill and circulated his energy to recuperate his injuries. The Southern Expedition Marshal saw through his actions and thoughts, but he did not take it to heart. After all, he was most concerned about the person who set up the true god-level array. "Old thing, Benshui disdains to bicker with a frog at the bottom of a well like you. The person who set up the array on the ancient viewing platform must be your accomplice. Get them out and Benshui can finish them off together." The Southern Expedition Marshal looked coldly at the messenger of the divine ruins and shouted arrogantly. The messenger of the divine ruins pretended to be puzzled and sneered, "Accomplice? I'm the only one here, how can I have an accomplice? Bastard of the heaven-punishing clan, are you scared? If you are, get out of the five elements world as soon as possible to avoid being buried here." The messenger of the divine ruins knew that the array on the ancient viewing platform was set up by Ji Tianqing. Since Ji Tianqing hid and did not show up, he naturally had his own plans, and the messenger of the divine ruins would not admit it. The Southern Expedition Marshal naturally did not believe him and sneered contemptuously, "Old thing, don't pretend to be confused with Benshui. You are just an 8th-stage void god. Even if you have the boundless god stone, you can't set up a true god-level array. If Benshui guessed correctly, this should be Ji Tianqing's method. I heard that he is the reincarnation of the divine king from 1,000 years ago, and only he can master a true god-level array. Get him out and die together." The messenger of the divine ruins was stunned and asked in puzzlement, "Boundless god stone? What is that? Ugly beast, have you lost your mind or something? Or are you delusional?" This time, the messenger of the divine ruins was not pretending. He had never heard of the boundless god stone. The Southern Expedition Marshal was completely enraged and said murderously, "Old thing. Benshui's patience has run out. Your dog life ends here." When he finished speaking, he raised his fists and punched the messenger of the divine ruins above the ancient viewing platform. Boom! Boom! Two dark red fists the size of mountains instantly traversed 200 kilometers in the sky and arrived in front of the emissary of the divine ruins. The emissary of the divine ruins was shocked. His figure flashed and teleported hundreds of kilometers away, barely dodging the fist attack. However, while the emissary of the divine ruins dodged, the ancient viewing platform was hit by the two fists. Boom! Amidst the deafening explosion, the ancient gazing platform shook violently, and rubble flew everywhere. The dark red fist radiance collapsed on the spot, turning into millions of fragments that scattered in all directions. After suffering such a heavy blow, the ancient viewing platform was on the verge of shattering. The surface of the platform was covered with cracks like a spider web. The foundation of the Milky Way 9 Transformations Grand Array that was set up on the stage was also damaged, and its power became extremely chaotic. Swish! Swish! The ancient viewing platform, which was full of cracks, flashed with 5-colored divine light and quickly leaked out a vast amount of divine power. Seeing this, the emissary of the divine ruins felt his heart ache and thought regretfully, "Damn it. The grand array that Tianqing laid down was actually destroyed by him. I originally planned to use this grand array to deal with the heaven-defying fleet, but it seems like there's no hope now." The previous battle and pursuit had already shown him the terrifying strength of the Southern Expedition Marshal. Now, the Southern Expedition Marshal had almost destroyed the ancient gazing platform with just one move. His expression became more and more serious, and a layer of haze covered his heart. A thought flashed through his mind uncontrollably. How can a few martial gods resist the ferocious army of the heaven-conquering fleet? Who can stop the Southern Expedition Marshal, who is at the true God stage? At the same time, the Southern Expedition Marshal waved his palms again and sent out 2 dark red light blades that were thousands of feet long. His target was not the emissary of the divine ruins, but the ancient gazing platform in the sky. Obviously, he wanted to destroy the divine array on the ancient gazing platform first before killing the emissary of the divine ruins. The emissary of the divine ruins was anxious. He growled and was about to block it. However, at this moment, a bright golden light lit up the northern sky, and a cold and majestic voice was heard. "A mere true god dares to be so presumptuous here." When the cold shout was heard, the 2 dazzling golden swords had already arrived first, piercing the dark red light blade. Kaboom! An earth-shattering sound exploded, shaking heaven and earth. The golden swords and the dark red light blades collapsed at the same time, exploding into thousands of pieces and scattering in the sky. The Southern Expedition Marshal's killer move had actually been neutralized. Such a scene caused everyone to turn pale with fright, and they revealed an expression of disbelief. The emissary of the divine ruins was shocked. He looked to the north with burning eyes and muttered, "In just a few years, his strength has actually reached such a level. This is unbelievable." Even though he knew that this person was the reincarnation of the Divine King, he still could not believe this result. The Southern Expedition Marshal looked to the north and stared at the white figure that was flashing over. His lips curled into a sinister smile. The reincarnation of the Divine King? Indeed, he is quite capable. The dragon-subduing general also looked at the newcomer with resentment and revealed a cruel and sinister smile. Ji Tianqing, Ji Tianqing. After 10 years, I can finally take revenge. After the Grand Marshal captures you, I will definitely cut off your head with my own hands. In the blink of an eye, the white figure teleported from 3,000 miles away to the sky above the ancient viewing platform. Swoosh! When his figure turned from an illusion to a real one, his true appearance was revealed. He was tall and in high spirits. His white robe fluttered in the wind, and his aura was unparalleled. There was no doubt that the newcomer was Ji Tianqing. His left hand was behind his back, and his right hand was holding the pitch-black sword of burial of heaven. He pointed it at the ground, and his aura was sacred and overbearing. Even though he only looked coldly at the Southern Expedition Marshal, the dragon-subduing general, and the others. His invisible divine power enveloped 1,000 miles. The Southern Expedition Marshal and many heaven punishers felt an overwhelming divine power pressing down on them. Instantly, their hearts tightened, and a trace of fear appeared in their divine souls. That was a suppression that came from the bloodline and divine soul level. Ji Tianqing had the blood of a divine king and the soul of a divine king. He naturally had an innate noble and majestic aura. He glanced at the Southern Expedition Marshal and then at the dragon-subduing general. He sneered disdainfully. Dragon subduing, you have disappointed me. You have forgotten the lesson from back then and dare to make a comeback. This time, no one can save you. You are dead meat. The dragon subduing general was shocked by Ji Tianqing's aura. He forgot to refute and could not help but take a step back. When he came back to his senses, he was instantly enraged. He shouted arrogantly, Ji Tianqing. You are the one who doesn't know that you are about to die. This time, I have invited the Southern Expedition Marshal to come with me. I have brought over 100 captains and nearly 10,000 elite soldiers. Not only will you die without a burial place, but the entire Five Elements world will also prostrate under the Marshal's feet. Ji Tianqing sneered mockingly. He sized up the Southern Expedition Marshal and shook his head. Dragon subduing, no wonder you dare to come back to die. It turns out that you have found a backer. It's a pity that your backer is too weak. Chapter 25-32. Too weak. These three words enraged the Southern conquering marshal and the top powers of the Skyslaying tribe. This was an unforgivable humiliation. However, Ji Tianqing had said it so casually as though he was stating the truth. How could the top powers of the Skyslaying tribe not be enraged? In the eyes of General Long Fu and the other captains, the Southern conquering marshal, who was a true god, was an invincible god. He was a real immortal god. Everyone treated the Southern conquering marshal like a god. How could they tolerate Ji Tianqing's humiliation? However, before the Southern conquering marshal gave the order, General Long Fu and the other captains did not dare to attack. The Southern conquering marshal stared at Ji Tianqing and laughed in anger. Ha ha ha, you are indeed the reincarnation of a supreme being. Although you have not regained your former strength, your arrogance and confidence have not diminished. The Southern conquering marshal shook his head and sighed regretfully. It is a pity that you are only a LV8 martial god. It is ridiculous for you to say such arrogant words. Although Ji Tianqing's strength and body constitution were special and no one could see through his cultivation level, the Southern conquering marshal was a true god. However, the Southern Expedition Marshal was a true divinity, a realm higher than Ji Tianqing. No matter how well Ji Tianqing hid, he could not hide from the Southern conquering marshal. Following Marshal Jinnan's words, more than 30 captains burst into laughter and began to discuss with contempt. Ha ha ha. I thought he was powerful. I did not expect him to be so arrogant when he is only a LV8 martial god. Haha, that guy must still be living in a dream. He thinks he is the king of gods. This Five Elements realm is too weak. The Southern conquering marshal can destroy it with a flip of his palm. Many captains mocked Ji Tianqing without restraint, their faces filled with pride. Only General Long Fu remained silent. His expression was ugly and his eyes were filled with shock. He stared at Ji Tianqing and muttered in disbelief, LV8 martial god. How is this possible? He had just broken through to the martial god realm 10 years ago. It had only been 10 years and he had already reached the 8th stage realm. I don't believe it. How can there be such a strange thing in the world? When the Southern Expedition Marshal heard the dragon subduing general's voice, his expression froze. What did you say? The South conquering marshal turned his head and stared at the dragon subduing general with his eyes wide open. General Dragon Fu slowly lifted his head and said with a bitter expression, Grand Marshal, when I escaped from the Five Elements world, Ji Tianqing had just broken through to the martial god realm. The Southern Expedition Marshal was dumbfounded. His face was full of shock, and he didn't know what to say. The mocking laughter of the captains stopped abruptly. Everyone was speechless. They were all dumbfounded as they stood on the spot with their mouths agape. After a long time, someone gasped and exclaimed. In fact, many people were unable to accept this fact and started to question General Dragon subduing. Fu Long, you must be mistaken. Who in the world can improve from the first level martial god realm to the 8th level in 10 years? That's right. We have conquered the purple cloud star zone and been to dozens of worlds, but we have never heard of such a thing. This is definitely not true. How can there be such a demonic genius in the world? Even if he is the reincarnation of a supreme being, it is impossible for him to improve by 7 levels in 10 years. That is the martial god realm. Everyone knew that the advancement of a martial god realm expert was very slow. Even a top genius would need 1 to 200 years to improve by 1 level. No one dared to question the Southern Expedition Marshal, so they could only question General Dragon Fu. General Dragon Fu remained silent. He was speechless. The Southern Expedition Marshal's expression was dark and his eyes were solemn. At the same time, Ji Tianqing's loud laughter came from the sky. Ha ha ha. Weren't you all arrogant and domineering just now? Why are you all so cowardly now? If they admitted defeat, they would obediently lay down their weapons and surrender. Perhaps I will be merciful and give you a dignified death. Ji Tianqing returned the Southern conquering marshal's words back to him even more harshly. The messenger of the divine ruins was in a good mood and could not help but laugh. At the same time, he secretly asked Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, other than you, who else is here?" Ji Tianqing replied, "Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and my 2 divine beasts. They will not show up for the time being and are hiding in the dark. I have other plans." The messenger of the divine ruins calmed down and said, "That's good. However, our strength is still not enough. We have to continue stalling for time. When Taihao and Fairy Yuqing arrive, we will be qualified to deal with them." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "They have more people and the Southern Expedition Marshal is a true God Realm expert. He will not be scared by me. Even if all of our people are here, we cannot fight them head-on. We can only try our best to deal with them. Fortunately, the divine ruins is vast. As long as we restrain the fleet and prevent them from leaving the divine ruins, we will be halfway to success." Ji Tianqing appeared to be extremely confident and domineering. However, he was doing this to buy time. Only he knew that they had no chance of winning against the heaven-defying fleet. Once they were defeated, the 5 elements world would be finished. After a while, the experts of the heaven-defying clan came back to their senses and woke up from their shock. The Southern Expedition Marshal looked at Ji Tianqing sharply and said in a deep voice, "Ji Tianqing. Benshui has to admit that your aptitude is extremely high. Benshui has never seen anyone like you in his life. A monstrous genius like you has never been seen before in all of history. If you insist on resisting, it would be a pity for you to die here. Benshui will give you 1 chance. If you are willing to surrender, Benshui will protect you and recommend you to the great emperor. With your talent, you will definitely be valued by the great emperor, just like Benshui. You have to know that our great emperor can reach the divine court and has the ambition and ability to rule the 3,000 worlds." As he spoke, the Southern Expedition Marshal pointed at the sky and said in a serious tone, "You know very well that this is a world sealed by the gods. Even if you are the reincarnation of the deity king, you will not be able to leave this world, let alone return to the divine realm. As long as you surrender, Benshui will take you away and ensure that you can ascend smoothly." Marshal Nanzhennan's words were extremely attractive to the martial gods of the 5-element realm. However, he was facing Ji Tianqing. The result was obvious. Ha ha ha. What a joke. Ji Tianqing laughed contemptuously at the sky. "Since you know that I am the reincarnation of the deity king, how dare you say such ignorant and ridiculous things? How can a mere great emperor of the heaven-defying clan be worthy of my surrender? He is not even worthy of being my servant. Even the divine court you speak of is just a joke in my eyes. As for leaving this sealed world, that is even more ridiculous. If I don't have a way to ascend, how did I ascend to the divine realm 1,000 years ago and become the king of gods?" You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.